Call the meeting to order for we ready? Okay. Okay. December 16th, 2024, Deschutes County Board of Commissioners meetings called to order. Please join us. Oh, we don't have we do have a pledge of allegiance. We're downstairs.
Yep.
I know, but we are downstairs. So we have to do a pledge. It's just part of the game. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I know. All right. Is there anyone in the room with wanting to make a comment? You need to fill out a blue form. Is there anyone online, Stephen, with a raised hand? Okay, all right, then let's go to our consent agenda.
Move approval of consent agenda.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Commissioner DeBonne? Commissioner Chang? And the chair votes yes. And I do want to point out that we did have a bridge contract, and Markham and Sons were the winning bid. They actually are a couple $100,000 under what our engineer's estimate was. So that's excellent news. So thank you for that. And we had, what, like 8, 9 people that submitted. So pretty tremendous. And thank you to that bid. Item number 3. The landfill siding consultant services contract.
Morning, Chair, Commissioners.
It's actually afternoon, isn't it?
It's always morning down here.
Yeah,
except
I know,
for
it's,
today.
I tell you, it's, yes.
I don't think I've been here on a Monday. For the record, Tim Brownell, Director of Solid Waste. So in front of you today is for your consideration is approval of notice of intent to award a contract for the landfill siting consulting services, the phase 3, to Parametrics Inc. Just for background, in 2019, as part of the solid waste management plan, that the county Board of Commissioners approved the intent to site a new landfill here in Deschutes County. So we started that process in 2021, in June 2021, where we issued our first RFP for consulting services. And that process was to refine and review the site screening criteria, apply that screening to develop a short list of sites for us to approve, for us to consider with the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, to facilitate and provide stakeholder and public outreach and input, and review and develop a pathway for state and local agency entitlement and permitting processes. Through that process, we narrowed the potential sites down to 2, at which point we moved into what we called phase 2 of the consulting services. The first one we issued an RFQ and RFP, and Parametrics was selected through that process. In phase 2, we actually did a sole source procurement to continue the momentum and process to get through the technical review of the final 2 sites which remained, which, as you recall, were the Moon Pit site owned by Hooker Creek and the Roth East site farther east out Highway 20 near Pine Mountain. And that phase 2 work culminated in the recommendation of the county moving forward with the Moon Pit site as the potential site for our future landfill. So with that, we in July, after that recommendation that came from the SWAC was approved, we issued a RFP for the phase 3 services. That the phase 3 will take us through the following: to provide technical assistance in the preparation and submittal of permitting documents and applications necessary for the development and operation of a new landfill, provide technical assistance in the preparation and submittal of documents and applications necessary for the land use authorizations and entitlements, facilitating the outreach to elected officials, land use authorities, regulatory and permitting agencies, and other interested parties, and to provide public outreach and coordination so that the public is aware of how this process is moving forward. So with that issuing of the RFP and that solicitation, we ended up receiving 2 formal proposals in response. Those proposals came, one from Parametrics, who we've used for the first 2 phases, and the other came from a group called Civil and Environmental Consultants Incorporated, referred to as CEC. CEC is a group that we worked with for the development of the Negus Transfer Station. They were the engineering firm that did the design and then project management of that process. We also did receive a formal letter of regret from SCS engineers saying that they were not able to propose due to capacity constraints, as they're doing a similar process in Douglas County here in Oregon. And then 2 other firms, Tetra Tech and Geologic, both called us and said that they were not going to be providing responses due to other constraints they had. We had a landfill siting review committee, which consisted of 5 members. Those 5 members were myself, Jeff Merwin, the Solid Waste Environmental Compliance and Infrastructure Manager, Chad Centola, the previous Director of Department, and now doing some consulting work for the department, Chris Doty of the Roads Department, and Stephanie Marshall of the Legal Department. Based on the review of these the results, you'll see in the packet we provided the scoring matrix of this. It was basically a unanimous decision of or selection of all 5 of the reviewers that Parametrics was the preferred vendor. We were rating their proposals in 5 general categories. Their experience, capability, and resources, which represented 30% of the scoring, their project team and sub-consultant experience, which was 20%, their demonstrated understanding of the project scope, also 30%, the clarity and organization of the proposal, which was 10%, and cost proposal, which was 10%. Based on the scoring, it's the recommendation of the committee that we move forward with a notice of intent to Parametrics based on the quality of their proposal, their familiarity with the project, and from a timing perspective, they'll be able to hit the ground very quickly, and the general overall scoring. So with that, I will open it to questions.
I know I see that they scored higher in each category, each of the 5 categories.
That's correct.
So it sounds like they're a great choice. I do have a question. I know that the one company we thought was going to do the appraisal couldn't do it, according to Christy, but do we have a second company actually working on that?
Yes, we do have a group called Rock Associates that we are working with, trying to enter final contract with. Yes.
Okay, when will they have that answer?
That's probably going to take about 90 days once committed.
Okay, 90 more days?
90 more days.
Okay.
I don't have any questions. I would just say, because of where we're at in this process with this particular site, I think this is an appropriate choice. I do want to express concerns about particularly this last bullet task, providing public outreach and coordination. Yeah, I was not super impressed with Parametrics' work in terms of public outreach and engagement in phase one. And in order to get this site to a publicly acceptable mitigation plan in order to get this site through land use approval processes, we're going to need to have the A game on public outreach and engagement for the remainder of this project. So, yeah, I mean, in my opinion, pushing us towards, encouraging us towards a site that has no neighbors might seem like a good outreach strategy early in the game, but at this point in the game, it's not necessarily. We're already at just one site, and we need to make this work not just with the neighbors of the site, but with the broader public as well.
Understood.
So Douglas County's effort, I think that's just an expansion, correct? I mean, ours is siting, theirs is an expansion.
No, they're actually in Douglas County. I believe they're looking to, they're issuing an RFP to, move forward in the development of a new site.
Is it a new site?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it'd be interesting to, I mean, I'll do my homework on that, but just to understand what they're doing there also in the state of Oregon at the same time. So what's the time frame of this? I mean, are they going to be our partners kind of to the end now, or how can we think of that?
That's a good question. There will be a final phase after this one, which would be, if successful in the permitting and land use entitlements, then there would be the design and construction phase. So that's anticipated. This is anticipated to take 3 years to 5 years, ideally, and then the design and construction phase would take another 2 to 3.
So our partners up to approval, or
Correct. Through the
approval is the goal.
approval is the goal.
And then are there updates kind of planned for these public meetings for the Board of Commissioners? Is a general idea of what could we expect to see?
Yeah, so the permitting, the DEQ permitting, any right-of-way permitting with BLM and the land use entitlement, those are all going to be public processes, formal public processes. We'll be coming to you before any and all of those to keep you updated as to how they're progressing and what the outcomes are.
Good. Well, as I say, I mean, big choice, big project, long time. So I'm just envisioning there may be points where we'll go 6 months without talking much, but then all of a sudden we'll have a flurry of activity also.
Correct. Yeah.
Well, it's good we're taking a moment to go back through a bidding process, kind of making sure we're, the partner at the table is the right one with us. Other engineering firms have the opportunity to think about what's going on here and what kind of resources they might have. So I support the fact that we're doing this at this point in time, and the decision of the committee.
If there's no other questions, I can move approval of a notice of intent to award the landfill siting consultant services Phase 3 project to Parametrics Incorporated.
And I will second it.
Is there any further discussion? Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner DeBonne,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Okay, Derek Hoffbauer, item number 4.
All right, good afternoon, Commissioners. Derek Hoffbauer, Outreach and Engagement Administrator for Cascades East Transit.
Bob Townsend, Cascades East Transit Director. I was a little worried I was going to say ODOT there, but I got
There you go. Got it.
Did it.
Got it right. Welcome.
Welcome.
Congratulations. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been a while since we've been up here, but this is the time of the year where we start to do our STIF, Statewide Transportation Improvement Fund, project solicitation. And so that means our advisory committee meets here on October 9th to prioritize the projects and then recommend their approval to the county. So the advisory committee did meet a few months ago to get a preview of, where the STIF funding is at, what projects are going well. CET provided some updates, as well as our other subrecipients that are on there. We have City of Sisters had applied for some funds for the Mobility Hub project. We also had Opportunity Foundation, Pacific Crest Bus Lines, and Central Oregon Breeze. We're all subrecipients, as well as Commute Options for a van pool program. So those projects are going well, and now we're entering into the 25-27 biennium of funding. So ODOT just released the application process at the end of August, and we're here to actually update the advisory committee roster because we have a couple of vacancies, and I wanted to go through that list and make sure you're all comfortable. I can go into a little more detail on who these folks are. We had a little bit of attrition on the committee, and then in addition to that, we needed to update the term expirations for the folks that are expiring in 2024. And, you know, one of the main impetus for changing this is Andrea Burrows no longer with CET, and we do need a public transportation service provider on the advisory committee to make sure everything goes well with ODOT reviewing all of our final documentation. And so we'd love to get Bob on that list to represent Cascades East Transit as the public transportation service provider. Ken Thorpe, he was working as a teacher down in the Lapine School District. He retired last summer, so that position is currently vacant. We could refill that. You know, we just need to do a little outreach. I think I can come back to the committee either this winter or next spring if you want me to bring a few more folks. We do have Lapine represented fairly heavily on the list, so we can, do a more broad recruitment if the committee would prefer to get someone from a different region on there. And then the next name that comes down to the list is Dan Yaumans. He is no longer with the Sun River Area Chamber. He's no longer a Sun River board member. So he, thought it would be better for the committee and for the funding to have somebody who's actually on the Sun River board advocating for projects in Sun River. So Kristen Thomas, she's the executive director. She said yes to being on the committee, and we've worked with her in the past on some the Sun River to Lapine project. And then we have Jackson Dumonch. He works in public works. Troy Rayburn was on the last list, but then he quit at the City of Sisters, and Jackson replaced him. So he would be the fill-in for Troy there. And then those are all of the updates. And then you'll just see in the table the 2024 are replaced with the 2026. So that's the list. Any questions about those individuals whom COIC is recommending to replace the others that have since left their positions?
So
Derek, I'm just curious about the alternates.
Mhm.
This list. So are the alternates people who are regularly participating and then only vote if there's one person short or something?
Yes. They regularly attend meetings. We did update the bylaws when the two programs merged. That was the STIF and then the Special Transportation Fund. And then at that point, we did add some alternate positions. They attend regularly, but they only vote if one member is absent. So it's like each committee member doesn't have an alternate. There's just a pool of two alternates in general. And our alternates have done a good job of attending the meetings and participating just to make sure we have a quorum, when we do all this voting for these projects.
Would it make sense to bump one of the alternates into a regular
To have 11?
to make
We certainly
them a
could.
regular member?
We certainly could. Yeah. Ideally, we don't want to have 10, but we could do that. If there was a recommendation, I would probably, the person who has the higher attendance and that's more engaged would be Casey Berg from OSU Cascades. And keeping Jennifer Glover as an alternate, but it's your decision. If that's the direction you'd like to go.
So right now you do have 10 on the committee.
We have 12 with two alternates,
Well,
but if you wanted
The
to,
voting people, you have 10. Which
yes,
even, which you
Yes.
really want to have odd,
Yes.
so.
ideally, yes. We've never had an issue where it's come down to a tiebreaker vote. Everybody, it's pretty much meets the consensus on that. So we wouldn't have an issue with 10, but if we wanted to have it an odd number, that's certainly to the committee's discretion.
And everyone that has been, that is serving wants to continue then?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
Check in with them.
The two alternates each cover some of the bases that Ken Thorpe was covering. So it's not like one or the other would be the clear replacement.
Mhm.
As I look at this list, I'm maybe just keep it as it is, 'cause knowing that we're going to have an opportunity to do an outreach and find somebody else. And then, as I say, if the alternates want to raise their hand too, then we can have a more complete discussion about that.
Right, and that was the idea is, with this time frame, I couldn't find anyone else on Lapine that wanted to do it. Lapine's a hard area to get folks to participate, so I just focused on making sure that we had Robert on the list. That's the most important, just to make sure that the ODOT rules state that you have to have a public transportation service provider. And then, just most recently, a couple folks have changed positions, wanted to get them updated and the terms updated before this next meeting. But certainly we could, keep it at 10. Like I said, we've never had an issue with, they've all been 100% consensus vote. So
So I think we have an opportunity in Lapine, the new neighborhood association, Crescent Creek. There's major engagement all of a sudden because of our choices about habitat property and the development patterns that are coming in Lapine. So my point is we just triggered about 100 something people that are very engaged all of a sudden. So there's going to be opportunities to put this out there with that group.
sure, yeah, I'd love to take the lead on that.
So just the notification that Christine Thomas is the director instead of board member on the affiliation occupation column.
Yes.
And you mentioned that, you said those words, it's just as you read it.
Yes. I think she's actually a board member as well.
Oh, well,
She's both.
he's the
right?
director.
Well, she is the director. So
Right.
you know.
With that, I'll move approval of the updated Deschutes Statewide Transportation Improvement Fund Advisory Committee member roster and 2-year reappointments for member terms expiring 2024.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Commissioner DeBonne,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes.
So then just to update, so there's STIF funding, kind of base funding and competitive funding or discretionary applications. And that's a process that you're going through right now. And this is
Yes,
why this
there's-
matters.
The discretionary applications were submitted a couple weeks ago. We'll find out, I think, in a few weeks if we're awarded or not. At least Cascades East Transit getting awarded for that. And then these are the formula funds, and roughly there's about 10.5 million for Deschutes County estimated from the payroll tax for the 25-27 biennium. So it keeps going up a little bit. The projections are a tad down from the last projection, but it's, a couple 100,000. So we're keeping an eye on that just to
And you said 10.5 million.
roughly.
And so I believe that means then that the only people that pay for buses are the ones either going river rafting or going to Mount Bachelor. Is that correct?
That's true. Yes.
All right. Mr. Townsend, it's so nice to see you here.
Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, and if you can extend our thanks and appreciation to everyone who's serving on the advisory committee for helping to make public transportation work in our community.
Yes, we will. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we will be back once the advisory committee ranks the projects. They will approve them in the committee, and then that's their approval goes to you. So I'll work with Chris to schedule a meeting, and probably early November, mid-November before Thanksgiving. So this board can review them, and we can have a more broad discussion about the project list. They are due January 16th, so we're trying to do things a little earlier to not get in that time crunch of having to do things in early January and get them approved.
Derek, I do have a question.
Yes.
Concerning supplies.
Yes.
All those buses that were ordered several years ago, have they all shown up?
They are trickling in now.
Are they still trickling in?
Yes, they are still trickling in. We've had some major supply chain issues. The smaller buses, we've received a few thus far, and then I think we have some more coming this month. and next month. So same with the vans. It's been really challenging to get vehicles. So we're using, all of our spares, and then we're hopeful to get most. I think we have 8 new vehicles that are coming, 3 of which we've received, and there are another 5 more on the way.
5
Uh,
more.
Yeah. And then
Amazing.
yeah, and then there's stiff discretionary that we applied for, but there were some vehicle orders in there because, we've got to keep ordering them because, that's how we keep up and we make sure we have a spare for each run. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
the hopes are between stiff discretionary, we have a flap approval for 6 new buses as well that
Mhm.
will be a little more timely in our future analysis of when we need to order and when the buses will be here for future services.
Well, I was talking to Pacific Power doing a project in Lakeview, and they said it was going to be 5 years, and it was because of parts.
hmm
And I know, I'm going, where are you getting those parts? So, yeah.
yeah, it's been challenging, but we've been able to keep service on the road. That's the most important.
And you do have the drivers now, right?
We do. We've been doing better with drivers than buses, actually. So that's a good sign.
Okay, good to hear.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Okay, next item is, item number 5. Good afternoon.
There's Laura Skundrick, Management Analyst.
Camp Sparks Budget and Financial Planning Manager.
So we're here today with proposed fee schedule amendments from several departments, proposing either new or revised fees, some as a result of the health plan employer rate increase. The target effective date for these proposed fees would be October 1st.
Could you maybe speak a little closer to the microphone?
Sorry.
It's not quite picking you up.
Target effective date for these proposed fees would be October 1st, 2024. So after today's presentation and any questions you may have, we are seeking board direction on whether you would like to proceed with the process to amend the fee schedule, in which case we would schedule for next week's meeting to hold a public hearing and have the board's final discussion and decision. So here with us today are those 3 departments, Community Development, Health Services, and IT. And in your meeting materials are memos from each of those departments, as well as the proposed fees from Health Services and IT. So we can get started with those.
Right. I do believe we have 3 options for building department.
Yes, we'll see them last today.
Okay, well, Sherry, you're last. That happened.
So starting with packet page 72, you'll see the Health Services memo and fee schedule with their proposed changes. You can see they've applied an 8% increase to the fees under their environmental health division. And so if you have questions on any of those, we do have Health Services staff here with us today.
Yes, I see Eric in the back of the room.
Well, so just, some big picture comments. I mean, this is right after we published our budget, and we know we do have increased healthcare costs. This is the time where we're seeing, inflation get plugged into our budget. And then also the health benefits trust, there's an aspect of it where we're seeing it happen real time. If we had a contract with a third party insurance company, we would see it next year, but we're seeing it. We're seeing it now where we can feel it as it's happening in our system. So, on one hand, it's hard to digest, but on the other hand, it's good that we're able to respond to it and acknowledge it right now. So just, that's kind of for everybody to understand. And I know during our annual budget, we always talk about how can we, keep the costs low for, the restaurant inspections, environmental health, fee for service for the companies that we help keep ourselves safe with. But this is the moment where it's just propagating through the need to cover these costs. So I don't have any specific questions. I'm not, these are very business-like proposals at this point in time.
On this specific set, I would also just kind of try to bring us back to earlier discussions we were having about environmental health fee increases. And, it was either over the winter or early spring when we got to review. But what I thought was very interesting was getting to review our environmental health inspection fees versus other ones around the state. kind of putting it in comparative perspective. And, at that point in time, I was, both impressed and concerned that our fees were generally lower than, or really competitive with fees in other parts of the state. And knowing that what's a little sad or demoralizing for me is, at that point in time we were talking about how do we address fees so that we could potentially even make our ratios of inspections to inspectors better, to provide a better level of service. And now we're basically just talking about how do we maintain level of service and offer the health insurance that we need to keep excellent employees. But just in that light, reflecting back on our fees being, lower than or pretty competitive with other counties around the state, I'm comfortable with and supportive of these changes.
Thank you. Okay, so if we're ready to move on to IT's proposal, that would.
I would like to hear from Eric. He's in the room. I just want him to kind of bring us up to date, maybe a quick little 1 minute, 2 minute, but would really like to hear from him. I know that you see the restaurant industry out there and you see turnover change, etc. It's I'm reading that not as many people are eating out, and yet when you try to go to dinner on Saturday night, it's really difficult. So Eric, any wisdom in your feedback?
Wisdom?
Yes. Yeah, I'm looking for wisdom today.
Eric Money, Environmental Health Supervisor. Well, we are seeing our restaurant numbers go up every year as far as percentage of how many food service facilities and caterers, and the amount of food cart pods is now at 34 in the county. 11 years ago, we had 1. So our numbers are increasing in the amount of food service facilities. And if a restaurant closes or a food truck closes, pretty quickly it sells, and we have a new owner in that place. And you guys have seen that. There's also obviously examples of restaurants that have shut down and they're not open anymore, like Cracker Barrel, for example. But I think that those are pretty rare.
We're just not a Cracker Barrel town, are we? It just didn't jive.
No, but I mean, as far as like revenues and expenses, it's unfortunate that we have to ask for fee increases
Yeah.
as a way of generating revenue. But, what's the best answer for balancing our budget? But I don't think we've seen anything dramatic at all in the form of food service facilities falling off and down 20%. So I think things are doing well for the food service industry in Deschutes County, but that doesn't mean raising fees isn't an option, unfortunately, for them.
But where's In-N-Out? I thought I heard like a year ago that they were coming to Bend, and I know they just left Oakland, so couldn't they come here?
Well, we're waiting for Red Lobster and In-N-Out Burger.
Yeah.
In-N-Out won't come here because they say that they'd have to freeze the product to get it here, and they don't want to ever have
Frozen?
serve frozen hamburger.
Okay. Well, but we do have a major airport, so they could fly it in.
I'm sorry if I
Well,
fell short
burgers.
on the wisdom quotient of that diatribe.
There you go.
I mean,
Okay.
I would say, what I hear from a lot of restaurant owners is workforce is still the real constraint. So, I mean, that is a real concern, and I feel for people on that front. But they're not telling me that their inspection fees are what's killing them. They're telling me that workforce shortage is what's killing them. So.
Right.
Great. Excuse me. Well, thank you so much. Did you want to add anything? No? You were
Sure.
supporting. Thank you. Thank you, guys. So we have, how many did you say? 34 food court pods now. Yeah, from 1 just a few years ago.
And 4 more proposed.
Or more, plus 4? Okay, great. Thanks. Okay, Laura, next one.
Moving on to IT, packet page 76. They are proposing a new fee set at actual cost of service to cover work done by staff when assisting other cities and counties who want to replicate some of our systems that our IT department has built for Deschutes County. They are frequently approached by these entities for help, and that includes with design, development, integration, deployment, and support of those databases and systems. So this fee would cover the associated costs with those services. And I believe if you have any questions, I believe Kevin Furlong is here today.
Yes, I see him.
I'd love to ask Kevin a question.
Sure.
So I read in the staff memo, that it's very hard to forecast or anticipate what kind of revenue this would generate, moving forward with this policy and approach. But I mean, can you give us a bit of a feel for how much other entities are asking for our tools, basically? And how much are we helping other local governments, other entities with their IT?
Right. Kevin Furlong with the Information Technology Department. In response to that, we haven't tracked it before. It's been a kind of an on your honor system, a trade. But now that the systems have grown in complexity, when we do get a question, the questions are much more in depth and require a great deal more time from our analysts to suss out the details and provide them with the information they need. So at the moment, it happens a few times a year, but the number of hours spent, I can't give you a hard value on that. We haven't, as we said, we didn't charge for it, so we didn't track it. But now that our own resources are stretched with demand, those are becoming kind of a burden and leaving a memory every time we get asked for services, and we've been rendering them for free.
Right.
Not so much the equal share of given and taken, more of a given. And so it's fair that we start charging for that.
Right. Do you think if you actually ask people to pay for that service, they'll stop asking?
I doubt it. They like the systems quite a bit. They've made attempts to replicate them on their own, and hence led to the questions.
Okay.
They couldn't get it all, and so they're eager to do what we have done, and they are quite nice.
So there'll be some maybe budgeting involved for a city that wants to be able to pay for these services then too. So, once again, it's appropriate to track these hours to start with. But yeah, being able to build towards them is important also.
This will give us that mechanism that we never had.
Mm-hmm.
So how long ago did Deschutes County develop Dial?
Oh, well, the very first rendition happened before I got here,
Okay. How many?
25 years ago.
Okay.
It was text only, worked over a modem. And now it's become web land information system. Much more elaborate.
So is somebody working on that system, updating it
All the time.
constantly? Okay.
Is there a basic structure for actual cost of service billing, or have you not even thought about that yet? I mean,
We have, we thought we'd try to be fair and just charge the cost of the actual individuals. What does Deschutes County have to pay for that labor from the individual who does the work? And we simply charge that exact same amount on an hourly basis for the.
well, because it'll be shocking. I know that, when you try to document how much does it really cost,
Yeah,
it's pricey.
yeah, there's a lot of things that go into a salary and compensation package.
Okay, well, I'm supportive also.
Thank you, Kevin. Okay, Laura.
Okay, lastly, last but not least, moving on to CDD, their memo is on page 69 of your packet, but they do have a slide deck here to share with us today. So I'll hand it over to Sherry and Peter.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the commission, Peter Gutowski, Community Development Director, and Sherry Pinner, Senior Management Analyst. We'll just, in the interest of time, I'll defer to Sherry to go through our PowerPoint presentation and then the options, which I think are noted in the memorandum for your consideration for the fee increases that could help us offset the cost of the health benefits fund increases.
Okay, so you actually are saying November 1st of 2024.
You are correct.
And Laura, you said potential October 1st, 2024 effective date of the other ones? Okay, so we've got a bit of a split.
The community development has to go through a process with BCD, a 45-day notice where we give them the information. They then populate the fee schedules. We go through an audit process to make sure they're accurate, and we won't be able to turn that around in a 5-day time period. That would be the reason. Okay, so as we have discussed, we're here today to ask for sort of a very small fee increase to help offset the cost of the increased health benefits trust charges. You know, just as a reminder, CDD is a fee supported department. Those costs, August 1st through the end of June is an estimated $167,000 in an increase. What we are proposing is that we try to recoup about 63% of that through fee increases, and that would be because 37% of those costs will be covered by the Building Safety Reserve Fund, which far exceeds our internal guidelines. And so, you know, for the near future, we will, if we have the opportunities, we'll be trying to spend that fund down. But the 63% would be for the general CDD divisions as well as the electrical division. I wanted just to remind everyone that in our fiscal year 25 adopted budget, we have $100,000 allocated for land use and code enforcement hearings. And this was just sort of a background on where we were. Additional background, for fiscal year 25, we adopted administrative code fees of 0.07% for code enforcement, 0.09% for both public information and advanced planning. And then our application fees, both land use and electrical, were an 18% increase, and on-site wastewater was 14%. Those adopted fees increased the average average permitting cost of a 2,700 square foot home by about $1,000, so about 12%. In one of our larger homes, say a 4,000 square foot home, it was still 12%, but about 16, almost 1,700. Again, we talked about the allocation for the general fund hearings, the general fund for the hearings officer deposits. So just as a history, fiscal year 22, we spent $21,000 on land use hearings services, and 23, we spent $20,000. Fiscal year 24, we brought code enforcement into that particular program, and we spent $25,000 on land use and $23,000 on code enforcement. And again, we have our allocation this year, but there have been no costs submitted yet. So we did come up with 3 options. The first option is no fee increase. The department absorbs the cost and pays for it through reserve funds. And effectively what this does in Fund 300 for the general CD divisions and then Fund 302 for the electrical division, it would decrease our operating fund balance by about 4 months. You may recall we have, again, a CDD internal guideline policy of trying to have a fund balance of anywhere from 12 to 18 months of operating cost. And again, Fund 301, which is building safety, it will be able to cover their increased cost. The second option is to offset the health benefits trust cost with fee increases and retain the allocation for hearings officer services. So what that would look like is fee increases would generate about $106,000. Code enforcement, public information counter, and advanced planning, those administrative fees would increase by 0.01%. And then our electrical, on-site wastewater, and land use applications would increase 2% each. That would add to a development permit for a 2,700 square foot house. That would add about $143 to the cost. That's about 1.4% over our adopted fees. And then, of course, same for the 4,000 square foot. It would be $222 per permit, about still at the 1.4% increase. And then our third option would roll in fee increases to cover the increased health benefits trust cost, plus increase our fees to cover the hearings officer services and forego the general fund allocation of $100,000 for fiscal year 25. And if we were to do that, that would generate approximately 156,000. And the difference here between option 3 and option 2 is that the code enforcement administrative fee would increase 0.03%, and the land use applications would increase 6% rather than 2%. This package would increase a development permit by about $239. For a 2,700 square foot house, that's about 2.4%. Same for the 4,000 square foot livable space permit. That's about $370 per permit, and still the 2.4% increase.
And Madam Chair, if I may, we just, as Sherry noted, for option 3, we just put that to your attention, knowing that there's a lot of demands on the general fund, and here in fiscal year 25, there's approximately $100,000 allocated to CDD. We have regular meetings with the Central Oregon Builders Association, Central Oregon Association of Realtors. Many of their members feel very strongly about the importance of having general fund contribution to offset hearings officer expenses. The rationale is persuasive to some degree that these hearings officer costs that are absorbed by taxpayers ultimately lead to investments into private property that then get on the tax, get on the tax rolls. They're assessed appropriately, and so they add to real market value. We're not here to advocate one option over another. It's just I thought it was important that the board have a broader context of the dynamic around option 3. No doubt that whether or not you consider option 3 or not, or if this topic comes up in future budget conversations, there certainly will be, I think, some strong opinions expressed by COBA and CORE about how they, want to prioritize this current contribution. But nonetheless, I guess the last thing that I would add, just value added to Sherry's piece, is we are very, very sensitive to our reserve funds, as noted on the 2 previous slides, that we know that how important it is to manage our contingency funds, and every bit counts. And so even when you hear a 4-month decrease in funds 300 or 302, I'll just say every bit counts, and we know how much demand general fund contributions are, and we know that if we were to ever see these reserve funds get diminished, how difficult it will be for the general fund to kind of keep CDD whole. So just bring that to your attention. Again, we look to your direction, how you would like us to proceed. So thanks for giving us this opportunity to provide a little bit more context. And Sherry, I'm sorry if I jumped right in for your conclusion, but just wanted to offer those remarks.
Fantastic. I don't know if there are any questions or more information needed.
Just to comment, option 3, thanks for taking it that far, thinking about what if we started to cover general fund allocations in there. I don't know that I want to go that far today, but I mean, it helps to think into that space, thinking, okay, what if, where would we go, and what do those numbers look like? So thank you very much for that.
Well, it's interesting that you did do option 3, but it sounds like the partners that we have with our building program really would prefer not to use that one.
They just might hear from them.
Yes.
I mean, to the extent that you, obviously, as was noted, there's a process to amend fees. There would be a public hearing next week. So if it was something, if you went forward with option 2 or you were exploring option 3, I would certainly anticipate that there would be some direct testimony on option 3. We have not heard any formal response to our respectful request to offset the health benefit fund costs. As Commissioner DeBonne noted, we just felt it was important as a predominantly fee-dependent department to share with you option 3. We're not advocating for option 3. We want the board to make informed decisions, and so we're not leaning to any of the options. We wanted to make the board aware of those various nuances. If you were to stick with the status quo, what that would mean to the reserve fund. And certainly options 2 and option 3 have some costs associated with development.
Peter, I wanted to ask about the hearings officer, how we pay for the hearings officers. And, back in the day when applicants would provide deposits against, potential hearings officer costs, if there wasn't some kind of, controversy that required extensive, hearing officer time, they would get that money back, right?
We would really only require a hearings officer deposit if there are certain types of applications that must go to hearing, like a plan amendment zone change. Other times, it takes the intake, one has to intake the application, look at the burden of proof, understand if it's a matter of first impression, and oftentimes, when those circumstances present themselves, we will take it to a hearings officer. And in doing so, just 2 years ago, we would respectfully request that the applicant bear that responsibility, and then we would bill against it. So if it was an expedited hearing process and there was the entire amount was not consumed, we would reimburse that amount. Similarly, if we've had hearings that are quite controversial, extensive open record period, in which case the amount can exceed, the cost can exceed that hearings officer deposit, in which case we would respectfully ask for repayment or reimbursement for those costs. So that's how we've handled it in the past. It's a case by case circumstance, again, that is really predicated for those that don't automatically go to a public hearing, just based on interpretation. We don't have, a real framework for any prior decision that gives us context, and we feel it's imperative that the hearings officer, as an independent land use attorney, can review the proposal on its merits with a robust public hearing process.
So, yeah, since we're, taking the reality of the situation at heart here today, I do support option 2, increasing some of these fees, but retaining that general fund allocation.
Yes, I would say the same thing. We'll see how much they drop the the interest rate tomorrow or today, whenever, I guess it's tomorrow, the next day. If it's half a basis point, or it's probably going to only be a quarter, but it does seem like interest rates are falling a little bit. So hopefully more people are going to feel comfortable in building, but the 1.4% seems very conservative. I know we need it to cover our costs, but yeah, I like option 2 also. Thank you for coming up with that.
I would prefer that we not use general funds to subsidize hearings officer costs for controversial proposal land use applications. But that may just be me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll return next week.
Yes.
Schedule the public hearing and back for discussion.
Okay, next Wednesday?
Yes,
Next Wednesday morning at 9 a.m.
25th. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Laura. Okay, we're now to item number 6. Looks like Will and Nicole.
All right.
Excuse me. Good afternoon, Commissioners. For the record, Nicole Mardell, Senior Planner with Deschutes County Community Development. And the item before the board today is to complete deliberations on the Deschutes County 2040 Comprehensive Plan update process and potentially consider first reading of ordinance 2024-007 to formally adopt the document. So for those who may not be familiar listening in, this is the culmination of a 2.5-year process to update the county's comprehensive plan, which is essentially the guiding policy document for land use development and resource protection in Deschutes County. The Planning Commission and Board held numerous hearings and several meetings to deliberate on the draft document this summer. The board last met on August 19th, and at that time, the board directed staff to work with the consultant to create a clean version of the document, incorporating all of the edits provided to date, and set a date for final vote and adoption. So that document is now before you. It's dated September 6th, so that's the updated clean version. And I did want to note we'll have one last edit prior to today's vote, which is we noticed on the credits page, we need to update the titles to recognize Commissioner Adair as the chair this year, as that did change from the last draft of the document. So apologies for that omission, but we are already working with the consultant to update that item. Otherwise, I look to the board for any additional discussion that you may have on the draft document, or if you'd like to move forward with a motion, we've provided 2 draft motions in the agenda request for today.
Well, the planning commission's changed around a little bit through this process too, if you look down the names. So I don't know, is there a plan for that or?
Yeah, we talked with our consultant about this. We kept in the planning commission members who were involved in the actual vote of the document. Yeah, so we felt like it was fitting to include those names.
And you did identify that Dale and Maggie served through June 23.
Yes.
Well, I'll just ask one more time before we move forward with this vote, whether my fellow commissioners would be willing to make any revisions or additions to better support the community goal of slowing or reversing the decline of our groundwater levels in the community.
Yeah, I'm seeing this document as a pretty mature work product. A lot of statements in here that explain the things that are, the discussion items of the day. So as I say, we have been through this before, so I'm not willing to, kind of change my support for this document.
We're seeing the public recognition of the crisis around the state increasing every day. The state did just pass their groundwater allocation rulemaking, new rules. And that may help to prevent our groundwater level declines from accelerating even faster. But those rules alone are not going to do anything about reversing or probably even slowing the current rate of declines. So, we have had lots of discussion about this. The proposals I've made, which I think actually would meaningfully address the issue in our community, have not been accepted. So I figured I'd just try one more time.
We've had an incredibly impactful summer. Our fire, I know we're not at 2 million yet, I don't believe, but the amount of land that is burned in this state this year has been unbelievably significant. We were really fortunate in Deschutes County on so many levels, but what you see has happened to the rest of our state is really, it's a tragedy. And we could, hopefully we're going to learn something. The fact that we're down to 168 logging mills in the state since 1980, we've killed almost 300 logging mills. I feel that water's an issue, but burning up, how good has that been for all of our wildlife in the state? So when you hear about 9 baby elk that are found without their parents, without their moms, it's, how many of those are going to survive the winter? So it's been a tragedy. And I feel like I really appreciate working with you, Nicole. I think you've done really a fair job. We've heard from a lot of people. We've heard from people that want to take away personal property rights. And I feel like in Deschutes County, we already have 79% of our county is owned by the government, the federal government, the state government. And I feel like we need to protect the other 21%. So some of that's cities, but it's definitely a challenging time. So it's been a very difficult summer because remember a lot of the fires were started by people, by man. And now, then we've had a lot of lightning. So it seems like fall is definitely approaching, at least this week.
Well, I guess that the last thing I'll say is that in the last 3 years, we've seen over 200 domestic wells in our community go dry because of these declining groundwater levels. And if we don't do anything about it, we can expect hundreds more in the next couple of years. And I would like to be able to tell all of the folks in our community that we've done everything we can to protect their wells, protect them from having to make a $50,000, $60,000, $80,000 additional investment. But if you can't do that, then
let's talk about wells. Wells don't live forever. Wells are like septic systems. I've talked to Mr. Buckner, who does well drilling, Palo Butte, and he said half of the wells he goes to work on are because of a sediment issue. It's built up. They don't live forever. The other day he did have one though that had survived for 60 years. That was an amazing record. So we have a couple different reasons why wells are going dry, and the state clearly could be more helpful to those people in private circumstances. The funding only would come through for people that needed to do something to their well. They could only make not more than, I believe it was like $59,000 a year gross income for 2 in order to get well funding. And I had talked to the people with that funding availability. And I said, is there any way you could help people out with a little more income, at least proportionally up so that they could get some help with their well issues. But I believe we're going to have to do a lot more talking.
yeah, the reason those hundreds of people in our community's wells have failed is because groundwater levels are declining. We can do things to protect them from those massive costs of drilling new wells, or we could, on the reactive end of things, not do anything about declining groundwater levels, and beg and plead with the state and federal government to bail people out. So I would prefer to do something proactive than reactive. But let's go ahead and vote and move on.
This is the comprehensive plan. Thank you very much for the staff and the community members getting involved with this, the Planning Commission for reviewing. This is a complete work product. As I say, there are differences of opinions in the community, and this does document that. I'm honored to know that this is the second version of a comprehensive plan since I've been in office. And the first one was basically finishing as I got here, so I wasn't as engaged, in the big picture. But also it's a good read, for somebody that moves here or lives here, just flipping through it, you're like, wow, that just explains the big picture on all kinds of things. The resource land, the aggregate resources, the environmental issues, and just understanding how we fit in with the state land use system, the 50 years of history that we've been living under for that land use system, how this fits in there. It's a really good read for anybody and everybody to be able to understand the big picture also. And it gives us a starting point or the next generation of foundation for future development. It's been said that rural development is limited because of the state land use, urban growth, boundary expansions. Ben Redmond Sisters in La Pine, not expansion, but infill even, is where the population is going to be by the majority. Yeah, I mean, the system generally is working for the state of Oregon and our land use system. Obviously, there's parts and pieces that I'd like to see differently or go back. And I really do support the fact that we did have the Big Look effort many years ago, which could have dialed in some things in the rural, but it all got locked down and weaponized at some point. So we could go down that path all day if we wanted to, but this is a great work product. Also, well, yeah, after we get to a vote on this, I have one other statement. So I'm ready to accept this document as it is. I did read it a little bit more detail, not cover to cover, but the majority of it again. And there's maybe a few wording changes, but it's just style, nothing substantive. So I'm ready to accept it if we want to get to the first reading.
Okay,
We
so,
could.
so do you want to make a motion therefore?
Sure. So then I'll move approval of the September 6, 2024 version of the Deschutes County 2040 Comprehensive Plan, accepting this document as it is.
Okay. I'll second the motion. Is there any further discussion? Commissioner DeBonne,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang,
I want to thank the staff and all of the community members who provided input on this document, and I'll respectfully vote no.
is there any further discussion? Commissioner DeBonne,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang,
No.
and the chair votes yes.
Okay. So yeah, if we're ready for the first reading, we'll make it official and adopting it.
Okay.
I'll move approval of the first reading of ordinance number 2024-007 by title only.
And I will second the motion. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, hearing none. Commissioner DeBonne,
Oh, yes.
and Commissioner Chang.
No.
Moving approval of first reading by ordinance 2024-007 by title only, and I will vote yes. And I don't know where you found the little photograph of the belted Galloway baby
Oh, I
calf,
saw it in there. Yep.
but my family that raises Herefords would not be happy, but it's really, really cute. So I don't know where you found it, if you found a baby calf somewhere and had to take a picture, but it was,
Here's the reading.
okay, let me.
Yep.
Read, okay. Reading by title only, an ordinance repealing and replacing Title 23, the Deschutes County Comprehensive Plan, and its ordinance number 2024-007, first reading only. And what is it, 2 weeks when you come back?
Yes, yeah, thank you very much, Madam Chair and Commissioners. So we'll return in 2 weeks for second reading to finalize adoption of this document. And I also wanted to note that we've completed an initial draft of the action plan. We are planning to bring that to the Planning Commission for just an initial review for their input on September 26th. And then following second reading, we'll return to the board to present that document. As a reminder, it's not a land use, decision, so you won't need to formally adopt it. It's just intended to be acknowledged to inform our future Community Development Department annual work plan tasks. So yeah, we'll return with those items and really appreciate all of the work from the Board of County Commissioners on this document.
Thank you.
So then one more note, the Oregon by the Numbers document has been published by the Ford Family Foundation and Oregon State University Extension Service. And this has been done annually for many years now. And it's just a great high-level read about population, kind of the identity of each county. There's a couple pages on every county in the state of Oregon, and then charts and graphs about just largest communities, household incomes, race and ethnicity, all kinds of great information. So really a complement to the comprehensive plan. It sense of place once again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're now at item number 7, legislative priorities.
Where we are.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. For the record, Jen Anderson, Strategic Initiatives Manager, and I have Doug Riggs with me as well. Give a quick introduction and then turn it over to Doug. So today we are here before you to start the conversation process that's kind of been ongoing internally about legislative priorities for the upcoming 2025 legislative session. So attached in the packet was a draft list. It's an initial tentative list that has been pulled together from a variety of conversations, including board meetings, budget week meetings, and conversations that Doug and I have had with department head staff on potential issues or priorities for the board to consider for the upcoming session. So we can go through that. We have in the room and online some of the department heads who are here. If you have questions or want to elaborate further or want to engage with them on any topics pertaining to their department. In a couple of cases, they were unable to attend or send somebody in their stead. So Doug and I should be able to pipe in for those particular priorities if you have questions for those who aren't able to represent here. So I'll turn it over to Doug, and we popped in one additional thing just this morning. Doug quickly put together a Central Oregon Legislative Visit little slideshow for you. So he's going to start with that, and then we'll jump right into the priorities.
Thanks, Jen. For the record, Doug Riggs on behalf of the county. Good to see all of you today. One of the things that we talked about when we started about 2 years ago was the importance of getting legislators to come to Central Oregon. So I just had a few slides. We can go to the next. Oh, I can go to the next slide. Wow, look at that technology. I do want to point out that this summer has been very busy, and all three of you are certainly aware of what's been happening. But for the staff and for the public's view, I wanted to share a few of the things that we've had occurring here in Central Oregon. I really view the interim as the foundation for success for the session. Once the session starts, they've got 5 minutes in their office and their bells are ringing and they got to go meet. And so really getting legislators into your region, into Deschutes County, and talking to them, at length is really important. So just a few pictures that I wanted to share, and they'll be in the record. But in June, or early July, we had some of the key legislators come and talk about our deflection program and the programs that we're working on here in the county. And I will tell you, having gone to a few of these around the state, our tour, our presentation, and the staff's overview of what's going on was very well received. So I think legislators came away from that visit very impressed, want to keep in touch with what's going on. So here are just a few pictures. It also made Twitter, so we appeared on Twitter with some pictures as well. So good event, and thanks staff. In August, we convened and coordinated with COIC and the Central Oregon Cities Organization to bring legislators to a variety of places. We started out in Sisters on a Sunday night, and Commissioner, you were there. We had great discussions on transportation. In particular, looked at the Sisters Roundabout, which at the time was half finished and now is almost all the way finished, or you can drive both sides. Drove that this morning.
Exactly finished.
Yeah, right.
Along.
It's coming along. It's functioning. Yeah.
It functions very well.
So that was good. Walked across White's Creek and got a briefing from the DRC and Kate Fitzpatrick on the restoration of White's Creek, which is really exciting and really a good news story for the region. And we had lots of good questions. And then we also talked about wildfire. So wildfire was a focus of the discussion at the dinner, and it was a very good discussion. I mean, we've had record numbers of acres burned in Oregon. Commissioner Chair, you mentioned that
Almost 2 million.
Yeah, 2 million, and you mentioned that Deschutes County hasn't been hit as hard as some other counties, but it's a topic that's front and center. So I would expect an awful lot of focus. And so I think coming to Central Oregon, hearing from what we are doing, what the county's doing, working with our state forester and our county foresters is really important. The next day, am I going forward? Yeah. Next day we went to Redmond, went out to the airport, had a great briefing on Core 3. This is a picture of the large group that we had in the hangar next to our briefing, but we had 4 legislators and Senator Golden's staff. Senator Golden himself wants to come back, so I'm hoping we'll get him back soon. And then we went out to the Core 3 site and Oasis Village. So All in all, really an exciting summer of legislators coming here, meeting with local officials and hearing firsthand about the important issues that we have facing us. I threw this in, not Deschutes County, but we went to Jefferson County as well. And we had both county and city officials in Jefferson County. We talked about homelessness, behavioral health response, which is what a lot of the fire districts, EMS units are really struggling with this. And there's a bill that's on our list about EMS modernization. And this is a key topic because the amount of calls that they're having to field responding to homelessness, responding to behavioral health crises is growing. I think, let's see, do I have one more? Oh, of course, how could I forget? Joint Committee on Transportation came to town last week. I thought that was really an effective opportunity for legislators to hear from local officials. Had the roundtable. I thought it was very well done. They had a series of 4 questions, which they asked everybody to respond to. I thought that was a good format. I heard and talked to legislators afterwards. They really appreciated the feedback that they got. And then at the end of that was the public hearing at downstairs at OSU Cascades campus. The public, I think there were about 45 people commented. Awful lot of the comments were organized by bicycle advocates here in town. And so there were a lot of comments on alternative transportation, bike transportation, but also some comments on the key issues at hand, which really are operations and maintenance, safety, especially safety on the 97 corridor, which is really becoming a problem. Winter maintenance was a key question, which is on front and center on everyone's mind. But those are some of the main topics that came up. And I think, is that my last slide? That's my last slide. So there we go.
So without further ado, we can just start into the draft priority list, if that works for the commissioners.
Excellent.
I'll just follow up real well. I mean, thank you very much, Doug, for coordinating that. It is about relationships at this point, keeping it a good communication flowing back and forth and keeping it positive for Central Oregon. The cities are engaged, the counties are engaged, multiple counties, but you did a great job representing us here this summer. Thank you.
And I would just tack on in terms of other legislative visit activity we've had this summer. We did have Representative Sanchez over here, and a number of other members of the Oregon legislative delegation that are local to Central Oregon to talk about the dire need for acute and respite residential care for youth in our community, behavioral health, on the behavioral health front, and also the intention had been to piggyback onto the Sisters in Redmond meeting, but we had Senator Golden virtually since he was pulled away by a big loss in his friend family that weekend. But we had Senator Golden here virtually to speak with a number of representatives of the local insurance industry here. So about his bill for, and we can talk about this more as we go on, but his bill for these neighborhood wildfire protection cooperatives and certification processes for insurance purposes.
Yeah, thanks, commissioners. I appreciate the comments and appreciate that added information. I think it's anytime we can get legislators to town on any of the key issues is a huge benefit. I did forget to mention that there may be another bite of the apple here. Core 3 plans to invite several legislators who could not come in August to come back in October. So stay tuned. We might have a few more, but I think this puts us really significantly ahead in the process with the number of legislators we've had come to town. So Jen, do you want to just have me walk through this?
Yeah, I think you
Okay,
can walk through it,
great.
maybe just give the very quick background of why we're, kind of the September, what the legislature is doing in September. I think the bottom line is we can take full support, or we don't need to take full support, but wanted to highlight some of these issues before you, and then see if there's some efforts to be made and outreach to be made in September ahead of the legislative.
Yep. So I would say just a couple of things from an overview perspective. The legislature has concluded their September legislative days, which were mainly updates from agencies. They'll have December and January legislative days, which are hearings in Salem. And those hearings will be focused on largely planned bills that they plan to introduce in February. So a lot of these topics will come up again in December and January. So there is going to be an opportunity for us to dig into these in more detail. The bill filing deadline for notes to legislative council is this month. And then bills have to be introduced by the beginning of December to be able to be printed, although we don't really print bills anymore. Published, I guess is a better term.
Schedules be settled for next week for legislative days? So as I say, you and I spoke, and I might be there for the State Interoperability Executive Council, making some connections, publishing the SCIP, which is a interoperability plan. So I think I'm going to be in Salem next week. Not sure, but yeah, the schedule's published.
Yeah, Commissioner, most of the schedules are not yet uploaded.
Okay.
And I would expect them to be by Thursday or Friday this week. We're hoping to
Coming
see
soon.
more details.
Okay.
I mean, they used to say they should be out a week ahead of time, but now if they're out the Friday before the Monday hearings, we're lucky.
Okay.
I have to be there on Wednesday afternoon for a confirmation hearing. So if there's other things that are happening during the day on Wednesday, sorry, not Wednesday, Tuesday for a confirmation hearing. So if there's other things happening during the earlier in the day on Tuesday, I might be able to track some of those. Keep it posted.
Yeah.
Keep an eye on the schedule. Let both of you know. It's great. So we're just going to go through this top to bottom. I'll be brief. If any of the staff want to come up, please let us know. The first issue that we're tracking is an interim work group issue on EMS modernization. I alluded to this in the slide presentation, but EMS and fire districts and fire departments are all struggling with the same thing, which is that the number of calls, the percentage of calls that relate to behavioral health and homelessness have skyrocketed. And in many cases, that's put the budgets of these entities in a crisis situation. On top of that, you have workforce issues and challenges in not just publicly funded healthcare, but also privately funded healthcare entities. So even if you're Metro West or AMR ambulance services, you are still facing the same kind of workforce challenges. So it's really putting a lot of pressure on the system. Representative Graber, who herself is a firefighter, is leading this effort. I haven't seen the final version of the recommendations. We expect that out fairly soon, I think. But this is something we certainly do want to track as it is very important to the county.
Couple notes there. In La Pine, we tax for fire response and we bill for EMS response, but the EMS response is taken over and the reimbursements aren't there. So, and I'm sure that's the scenario everywhere, but that really needs to be changed around. If you're running an EMS agency, you're using firefighter/paramedics to respond to EMS, but EMS never covers its costs. That's the conundrum right there. We did have our private ambulance service here in Central Oregon for a while. We even changed our county code to allow them to be on the run card. Number 3, if your 2 units are out, or Sun River or La Pine, mutual aid's exhausted, then you can even call a private company. But that they couldn't justify it either, just the cost of reimbursement. So it's a tricky one.
Yeah, Commissioner, that's another big issue in the task force, which is OHA reimbursement for services. There's another issue that we face less than, say, Jefferson County, and that's the fact that many counties have federal lands, federal properties, or tribal properties to which they have to respond to and get no reimbursement at all. So really, it's all 36 counties are facing this. I read that I think Fossil just had to close down their ambulance services. Many small communities are facing the same thing. So this is really it's a crisis levels in the state, and I think it'll be a priority for next session.
And we're doing the ambulance service area, so we're defining the footprint, and we even put the rules and the expectations in place, but the numbers just don't follow it. The finances just don't follow it.
The Board of County Commissioners, and you've talked about these issues, but there are 5 priorities here. One is legislative change to allow managed homeless camps in the Gales property. That's one issue we've talked about before. The second is Measure 118. As you remember, this is the former IP 17, which is qualified for the ballot. It's a 3% sales tax on gross receipts for companies more than $25 million. There is an OBI managed campaign against the measure. It's raised about.
So what is it,
$10 million.
Pauline, at this time? Because I've heard from the woman who owns the feed store. She said everything in her store is going to go up 6% if this thing passes, even though they've got it, they're saying that it's over 25 million. That's really not the truth. It's going to all pass down.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I don't know what the polling is. I'm not sure that OBI has completed their poll yet. I don't think they have. I think that was one of the things they are out in the field on right now. Measure 97, which was very similar. It was a 2.5% fee tax, failed narrowly in 2016. But I think for the conversation that I've heard on this issue is that it's a matter of getting education out to the voters. This is what it'll do. This is what it won't do. So this is going to be one of the big topics, I think, for the next couple months if you turn on your TV or open your mailbox.
Well, the chamber's doing something on it tomorrow night.
Yeah.
Here in Bend. So
people will be paying a lot of attention to this for the next couple of months. And for the record, I haven't heard anyone speaking in support of it. So I'd be surprised if it passed, but I think we're talking right now about things that we want to focus on in the legislative session starting December, January, and this will be decided by then, right? So I don't know if this needs to be on our list for discussion right now.
Yeah. Good point. I'll rely on the 3 of you to make that decision, but I will say that if it does pass, it will be a statutory measure, and therefore the legislature will have to pass implementing legislation. So we'll probably know more in the next couple of months as far as polling goes, but it's certainly something we could revisit if it were to pass. Rely on Jen to give you some advice.
It's just the beginning conversation. So all of this can be flexible as we progress, and we'll keep an eye on all of these as in the news cycle and then what the legislature's doing. Move forward.
So did our clerk put down ranked choice voting? No. Okay.
There's a way. But we did have conversations with him, and at this juncture, he felt things were a little bit premature, and then after the election.
Yeah. No.
But he and 15 other county clerks have come out against it. So
He has not engaged with us on that topic. I'm happy to reach out to him to see if he wants to send an email on his thoughts on that.
please have him. Would you do that?
But again, this is something that's on the ballot in November, and
Not legislative.
if it passes, then we'll deal with it. And if it, be prior to the election, if you are for or against something, then you can be out in the community and be advocating.
Well, who knows who's going to catch us discussing it. So
the next issue is an item that I think you guys have talked about before, which is a legislative fix for the Orenco ATT septic systems. I'm not an expert. I've looked at all the details and the background on this, but it's one thing that the county is considering, and we thought we should put on the list.
I think it's a
additions?
Commissioner DeBonne has been particularly interested in this topic.
Well, and it just popped up, as I say, there's just that scenario where there's used systems coming out of the ground that have been put in the last few years. There's just operators and installers that are ready to reuse them. And according to DEQ, there's the consumer protection clause saying that there has to be a 2-year manufacturer warranty for any installed system. So it's just a scenario that we could look into. Representative Werner Reschke has already offered to get engaged with a bill. And I think there's support for at least starting down this path by my fellow commissioners. Is that correct?
Oh, definitely.
No,
Yeah,
I've heard about this a lot from people in South County the idea of taking an almost new system and putting it back to use instead of scrapping it, it makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, so it's just a starting point at this, but Representative Reschke has gotten engaged and he said he will sponsor a bill or however we put it together. But there was an email last week saying he's taking it.
Follow up with them as well. Core 3, which we've certainly talked about before, the plan with Core 3 is to submit a bill, which will be introduced by our local legislators, which would obviously allocate the second tranche of funding. The first tranche was back in 2021. Legislators who came out to the site and have been getting briefings seem to have been impressed by the planning, the coordination, the effort to get all the state agencies on board. So that's a bill that looks like it'll go forward. A lot of this is dependent on the revenue forecast, and the September revenue forecast was up fairly significantly. We'll see if that holds over time, but that was a good sign.
Well, and then that's a reminder that during these legislative tours, we did have the director of the OEM and DHS emergency management. So we had the director level people in the room with us Sunday night and Monday at the tour. So that was really good. So there's state agency engagement.
I can grab this next one. So the Cannabis Advisory Panel, just put this on there for your consideration. Nick and I have talked about this a couple of times. So currently by ORS, essentially they have to meet on a quarterly basis. And we've gotten to the point with the Cannabis Advisory Panel of them receiving around the same amount of fund on a yearly basis from the marijuana tax revenues and allocating approximately proportionally the same amount of funds to the same departments. And so there's a little bit of, difficulty in coming up with agenda items on a quarterly basis for them to talk about, given the limit of what they can talk about. And so Kim and I have reviewed that ORS, and right now they do have to do it on a quarterly basis. As we know, the background here was it was established because of what happened in Deschutes County, of the county no longer having, new cannabis businesses, but having some there and already receiving tax revenue. And so I think it potentially could be a legislative fix if the commissioners are interested in, pursuing, see if one of our local legislatures were interested in writing a legislative fix to, one, either get rid of the requirement for a cap, and then the county can kind of set up their own, requirement for a committee, or to potentially get rid of the quarterly requirement meeting. So at this juncture, I think, 1 to 2 meetings a year one meeting could sufficiently actually cover all the business required, but 1 to 2 meetings a year. So what typically happens is the departments will come before them, present a proposal on why they want the funds, and then the next meeting they allocate those funds, and that could be very easily done in 1 meeting. So just something for consideration. Doesn't need to.
Support it. Yeah, let's have that discussion. It was very dynamic time when the revenue was coming in and the people, we opted in and out, and then the people voted and all these different things happened. But now that we're a few years past it, let's look at it again.
And I haven't done significant research, but in my general research, I think we are the only county that has a cap by that requirement. So it's like uniquely.
We're the only one who opted in and then opted out.
At this time. So the cap was written for the state for those that fall into it. But right now it's just Deschutes County that has to do this. And, it's a significant amount of staff time. And then we have other departments come and present before the cap to give them information, just to have quarterly meeting agenda items type thing. So it's a lot of staff time going into each of these meetings.
I guess the one other question I'd ask is if you scheduled quarterly meetings and you were, and you just said, well, we don't have any agenda items for this meeting, so we're canceling it. Does that meet the intent of the letter of the statute, or is that not okay?
Yeah, I mean, I would have to look into that further, but I think that you should probably make a good faith effort to probably hold the meeting. And even if it's a short meeting, but still go forward with something rather than to just schedule it and then cancel it.
I don't think it's been long enough. And thank you, Dave Doyle, for all the work you did on that when we had the revote. So I appreciate it. Yeah. They,
So do you support bringing this topic up for discussion or not?
I don't know if it's been long enough. I think they have to forget why we're being punished.
Oh, well, I agree with that too, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if
You
it's
don't think
been,
it's been long enough for the?
no, I don't think it's been long enough. Yeah. Anyway, it's a punishment.
I agree. Well,
Or kind of support to just
I still-
ask
yeah.
around to see if there's a legislator who wants to potentially take this on.
I support that.
I would like to know whether it's okay to have a schedule of meetings and then cancel them if there's not enough agenda items. This is I appreciate that it is a burden, is a administrative burden for us, but getting a bill passed is, it takes a significant amount of effort, and we have a whole lot of things that we need to be focused on this session, and this wouldn't jump to that, if we could just kind of go through whatever motions we need to go through and meet meet an appropriate amount, then I don't have a problem with that.
They, for sure, they can meet virtually. And so right now we have probably 90% of the CAP show up in person. It's a good group of people. They've all elected to come for their, re-up their term. So, we have a great group of people there who are dedicated to it. They're limited on what they can do. They have broader ideas, but they're limited on what they can do as a CAP. So, one of the things that we're going to discuss is, do they want to move to just strictly virtually? But we can also, I will look into this. Can they log in, log off, basically call it to order and adjourn, I think is basically, is that what you're?
Yeah. Or, is it, if they meet and they don't have a quorum, but there's a topic of, a presentation topic of interest to a few of the people, can they just have a real informal discussion, informal presentation and discussion, and then, call it, then they met, they didn't meet quorum. Is that okay? Again, working on a bill is, it's an investment of time and effort, and we have a lot of stuff that we need to focus on this legislative session, and this doesn't rise to the top for me.
Okay, I will look into a few of those questions and we will continue the conversation. Okay, we'll move along to, I think next is.
Before we leave
Sorry.
this section, I did want to circle back to the discussion about legislative change to allow managed homeless camps in the unincorporated county. I just want to point out that we have a pathway without legislation. And the Gales family is attempting to proceed down that pathway right now. And that pathway is to rezone to something that's not exclusive forest use, exclusive farm use, and going to rural residential allows people under House Bill 2006 to do indoor shelter. Going to some rural residential or some other classification would allow them to utilize the safe parking provisions that we have already put in place for the county. So again, pursuing legislation is a significant investment of time and resources. And if that's the only property that we are that is raising their hand and saying we want to do something, and if they have a non-legislative pathway, then I don't see a need for us to spend effort on this. What I would, in the realm of homelessness, a response, two things that I think that we should pay attention to, and maybe you could add these to the list, would be number one, adding safe parking to the list of kind of recognized homelessness responses, that is both recognized within land use, but also recognized for public investment. If the state wants to put forward money for shelter or other kinds of shelter, I guess in this case, then if safe parking was actually a recognized shelter option by the state of Oregon, then when when it comes down the pipeline, we would be able to use it for what's one of our most effective homelessness responses in the community. So there's that. Also, there has been a significant amount of shelter stood up in the last couple of years in our community. I know that all the people who operate those facilities are concerned about ongoing operations funding. We helped to jumpstart a lot of that with American Rescue Plan investment, and American Rescue Plan dollars are running out. So if we believe in these facilities, and they have been doing a great job, in my opinion, in our community, we need to figure out what the long-term play is here and how these shelters will be operated in the long term. Unless we want that to go on the county general fund, looking to the state to play that role, I think is a good idea.
Any further discussion on the BOCC topics? Should we move to CDD now? Yes. Okay, I'll turn back over to Doug.
So I think Peter was in the room earlier. I don't know if Peter wants to come up, join us.
He is.
There he is. So one of the items that has come up, and I think we've had discussions before on this issue, as you recall, in 2023, we passed Senate Bill 644. Senator Golden helped us get that bill through, allowing for ADUs on rural properties. The way the bill was drafted left some inconsistencies and internal potential contradictions. And so we've been discussing whether or not we should propose a technical fix. We did suggest this to Senator Golden as the chair of the committee in February. He looked at it. He was sympathetic towards it, but he said, I just don't have enough time in 8 days, because it's such a short time frame, to get a bill like that through. So if you're interested, come back and we'll consider it for 2025. So that's one of the things we're considering. So Peter, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Can provide some context again for the record. Peter Gutowski, Community Development Director, and behind me, 2 rows back, is Kyle Collins, Associate Planner, who was instrumental in coordination with Will Groves and others on the accessory dwelling unit legislation and tracking the forthcoming responsibilities that come when the state adopts a wildfire hazard map. So there's some inconsistencies in terms of how accessory dwelling units are treated in relationship to residential dwellings. And so once the wildfire hazard map is adopted, the way the current legislation on the books, it will require ADUs in high hazard areas, but not in a wildland urban interface. But if they're located in a high hazard area, they must be fire hardened. And so that's a difference from residential dwellings, where you have to meet both of those criteria. You have to be in a high hazard area and in a wildland urban interface to require fire hardening. But for ADUs, the way the Senate Bill 644 and then subsequently with Senate Bill 80, that was left unresolved, or as it's presently being interpreted, rural ADUs will be treated differently.
So Peter, someone who wants to build an ADU in a high hazard area that's not in the WUI would still have these requirements.
Would have to be just fire hardened. And then similarly, if an ADU is in a wildland urban interface, regardless of what the hazard classification is, they're subject to defensible space requirements. So the argument is pretty simplistic. All residential dwellings should be treated the same. And right now, ADUs are singled out once that wildfire hazard map is adopted, and we're expecting that next month, subject to whatever challenges individuals present to the Department of Forestry. So, as Doug noted, we're elevating this. We've alerted the Department of Land Conservation and Development. We're not well versed in writing statute. Instead our emphasis is being able to articulate where the inconsistencies lie. Certainly the royal we, our staff could take a run at that with some help with legal counsel. But again, we think in terms of county code and, so, I mean, direction on that could prove beneficial if you wanted us to kind of get a jump start on that. But right now, that's what we've elevated.
Is Deschutes County the only one that's kind of motivated to go deal with this? I mean, because it's statewide, isn't it?
Well, it's statewide. I think the reason why the county finds our county in the situation is because we're one of the first counties that have implemented it, and we have staff. We were administering. Not only have we adopted it, thanks to the county commissioner's leadership, but we're administering the code, and we have staff like Kyle, who is so immersed in the minutia that he's the one who I think he and others discovered this inconsistency. So it will come up, I think, with more counties once they start implementing it. So there's still only a handful that I think have this code in place.
Do we have a sense of the scale of the issue, of the concern? I mean, are there a lot of ADU eligible properties that are only in one or the other of these classifications?
Passing the mic now to our subject matter.
Yeah, I can cover for the record, Kyle Collins, Associate Planner. That is a great question, Commissioner. Unfortunately, because we don't have a final version of the map, as the commissioners are aware, a version and the actual final version of that map is forthcoming on October the 1st. Until such time that we actually have a version of that map to perform some analysis, we can't give you a formal estimate of how many properties are affected. Commissioners are probably aware that several thousand properties were potentially eligible for ADU development as we were passing the ordinance last year. I would suspect, just anecdotally and looking at some of these maps, probably somewhere in the 50% range could potentially be affected by this, just because there are such a large number of properties that are currently within that high hazard designation. The WUI designation is a little bit more in flux. Some additional rules were put in place by the Oregon Department of Forestry and how that WUI boundary is actually going to be put on the map. And so I don't have a formal estimate of how many properties that would be. But again, likely to be in the high amount of properties that could potentially be affected.
Okay. Well, if you told me it was only like 10, then I would say I don't know if we should worry about this, but that's, 50% of thousands is a lot.
Yeah. And again, just to clarify, that 50% remark is specific to the rules coming along with the actual hazard designation itself. As Peter pointed out, that it really forks here into two separate channels. So there are different rules for ADUs specifically just regarding their hazard designation and different rules regarding their WUI designation. I would expect the hazard designation to have the higher impact, even though both are implicated in some way.
And the unfortunate thing is that most of these ADUs, in order to get approved, have to have their own septic systems, which adds another $45,000 to the cost of. So we really haven't, as much as I thought they could be beneficial to our region, we really haven't had that many built.
Oh.
It was adding, I think it was significant number of costs on top of the building costs that are already so high, at $400 a square foot, whatever. So it would be nice to clean it up because I do think it's important at some point in time.
Yeah, Madam Chair and Commissioners, I agree with that. And in my conversations with legislators, I think they would view this as a technical amendment, might be something that would be rolled into a larger bill. The committees typically do a technical change or a technical corrections bill at the end of the session. So if this is something that the commission wants us to go ahead and get drafted, we can do so. I've also talked to Lane County. They had a real interest in ADUs. So this is on their level of interest. It might be a little lower than ours because they haven't run into it yet. But as Peter said, I think that other counties over time will run into the same issue. So if we can get it cleaned up fairly easily without expending too much time, that would be the goal here.
That would be excellent, honestly. Clean it up. Thank you, Kyle.
Of course.
Sure. This has been a prominent topic, every regular session, whether or not something can be produced, I think is another matter, just because there's always organized opposition. But as a fee-dependent department, right, that manages and handles development activity, the board is well aware that the first appeal of an administrative decision is capped. It's $250, and that's been in place for decades. And I think the respectful, well, for conversation, it's just an acknowledgement that it's not covering the cost of inflation. And, you know, is there interest in, and I, you know, if there was, I'm sure, you know, would affect not only the Association of Counties, League of Oregon Cities. I mean, this is a fee that applies to all local governments, but it's acknowledging that the $250 fee is incredibly low, and it doesn't cover the cost for departments like ours that are fee dependent and others that, you know, have other sources of revenue to keep their planning departments operational.
So if we're talking about something that doesn't cover the cost, what kind of fee are we thinking of suggesting they raise it to?
That's an excellent question. And I think that's going to be a political
hot potato.
It's a political answer. And because I think if you were going to, if there was a recognition of the importance to cover the cost of services, then the language would give latitude, a bill would give latitude to each local government to have it cover actual cost of services. My sense is politically, there would be an interest to cap that at some amount. So I'm not in a position to say what that Goldilocks number is. I'm just acknowledging that it doesn't come close to cover our cost of services.
Well, yeah, I support bringing it up for this legislative session. It's been a common theme for many, many years.
And there may be a companion bill that's out there that the board may find itself supporting, but this is a popular or prominent topic that comes up every regular session.
Popular, prominent topic.
Well,
Okay.
yeah, controversial topic.
Engaging.
Peter, can you just give me a sense? So we know, you know, there's, you know, well-funded organizations that file appeals, you know, against applications. I mean, we just saw, for example, you know, an appeal come from the 710 Properties, you know, also a big organization. So, you know, so those entities, I'm not that worried about charging more, you know, charging a higher fee to. But how many appeals come from just the neighbor who is concerned about, you know, what the huge transformation that's happening right next door to their house?
You know, I would say it's a handful every year. I mean, it's admittedly, we have prominent, like you said, organizations and individuals that are well vested in land use in our county. I'm taking there's no critique or complaint about that. That's the Oregon land use system affords citizen involvement, but I would say it's a few. You know, as you saw earlier when we were talking about the fee increases that are the costs that are being borne by a handful of departments on the health benefits fund. Our department acknowledged our hearings officer expenses last year. You know, that was $20,000 approximately, or maybe that was the year before last. And so it's not a lot, but it's still an issue. I think that warrants a conversation, if nothing else.
Yeah, no, and I'm the reason I'm asking how many kind of like mom and pop type appellants there are is because those are the people. I mean, you know, someone who is really concerned about you know, something that's been proposed, at their doorstep next door to them. I mean, those are people who we do want to make sure that the appeals process is accessible for. I mean, you don't want to charge a neighbor $10,000, to pursue an appeal. So I do want to have an understanding of, how many people who, how often we are looking at appeals from, essentially professional organizations, and how often we're looking at, real citizen type issues.
I think that it's an excellent question. I think the issue that we find ourselves in is we have matters of first impression that our planners find that it's going to be beneficial to take to a public hearing. That allows for the process to be somewhat expedited. You can get to a decision quicker. If the complexity warrants the hearings officer to weigh in on procedural and substantive grounds. I think if you step back and if you recognize that there's this appeal process, and I think if the appeal fee was shifted, I mean, from one perspective, if you shifted that cost to as an actual cost of services that's borne by the appellant, I think what it does to the practitioners in the land use planning profession is it allows them to review the application on its merits, and if they feel compelled to issue an administrative decision, they would do so, and know if it's appealed, then it would go to a hearings officer. I think it allows for a more fluid process. But when you're mindful of opponents and appeal fees and matters of first impression, sometimes the simplest thing to do under our current paradigm is just to send it to a hearings officer. And I think there's good arguments that can be made that if the hearings officer expense was modernized statewide at the local level, I think you would see more administrative decisions being issued, which empowers those professionals to make some judgment in coordination with their colleagues. And in our case, we send more land use issues, not always because of this appeal fee, to a hearings officer. So I don't know. Sometimes I feel like the program could be simplified a bit through some modernization. Can you do both? I don't know. I'd like to believe so. So that's why I brought it up. It is admittedly a big ask in a statewide system that predicates itself on low entry citizen involvement opportunities. The same is true for LUBA. LUBA's fees, if you want to initiate a notice of intent to appeal, it's like $400. I mean, that's an easy entry point for someone that finds that the local decision believes that local decision is flawed. So I think I probably got on my soapbox a little too high.
So taking a half a step back, you had another note in here about ADU clarification language on attached and shared walls. I hadn't.
Yeah, right. That we're navigating that. Thank you. I'm sorry we missed that. That has to do with the desire for.
So people are asking for that now?
Clarifications that if you want an attached unit to your house, you can do so. We believe that the existing code, if you squint hard enough, that was the intent.
Because it was always about, is it within 100 feet?
Yeah.
But what if it's touching or part of it? Yeah.
So if you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound with ADU technical clarifications.
Yeah. So I'm supportive of that. Just making sure we're just talking about it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, as I say, so I support, having this appeal fee discussion. We don't know if there's legislators going to get engaged or not. From Deschutes County's point of view, that does kind of make you scratch your head about, does it evolve over time or not? That's kind of a starting point.
And when did that fee of $250, when was that initiated? Do we have was it 2000, 2010?
I think it's much longer. I think it's been in place for decades.
Okay. So it really needs to be, it's just like the ODOT things that there was no mention of inflation in the 2017 bill. And look what a mess that turned out to be. So yes, maybe we could point out when it was initially set up in 1980. And maybe it's time that we raise it.
Thank you.
I'm sure Doug could do that. Couldn't you, Doug?
Piece of cake.
Piece of cake.
be mindful of CDE taking all.
The other departments.
Um, the other, the other piece, Will Groves, the planning manager, has provided a detailed overview of the National Flood Insurance Program as it pertains to the Endangered Species Act and a biological opinion. It's reminding, there may be some legislation that comes out of Tillamook County or through, maybe even through LOC and AOC, but implementing this law is going to be challenging, especially for development in the floodplain. I will do a very poor job of articulating, but development in the floodplain can require a biologist, a geotechnical engineer of some sort to flood proof, and what local governments who are affected by this biological opinion. I think it would be worthwhile to at least be supportive if there's legislation that come from counties that are really affected by this. This obligation. Those are coastal counties, Mid-Willamette Valley counties, likely some in the gorge. So it's just highlighting that we may see legislation that is respectfully asking for greater certainty at the local level, and it's something that we should track and presumably support.
Yeah,
Peter, could you speak closer to that microphone? It's clear over there. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
I support just keeping us on the tracking list, and because we do have our expertise in this, but this isn't big for our county as it is for others.
Yeah, the amount of area affected is not very big, and the amount of area where there's actually a stream with fish in it is only a fraction of the total mapped area, which was very puzzling to me when I first saw it. But I think I understand now why that is. But I would by the same token, a piece of farmland that's in the floodplain that gets wet enough that it could flood, but is nowhere near a fish-bearing stream. I don't think we're going to have a lot of issues with. I don't think we're going to have a lot of land use issues either.
Thank you. The only other bullet that we had, I'm not sure this is going to manifest itself in legislation, but it's just an acknowledgement that the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality is doing rulemaking to address some of the aspects of the on-site wastewater program for alternative treatment technologies in terms of certification, enforcement. I mean, the board earlier just mentioned the interest in reusing systems if they can be shown to be intact and have the integrity to continue to perform at the level they were designed for. So that's just, I think that was a bullet just to underscore the emphasis of the work that DEQ is doing. I think they're projecting at least a 2-year effort. So whatever momentum or support that Deschutes County can lend to DEQ's efforts are going to be important. Of course, we're still waiting on the groundwater monitoring results. So seeing DEQ have some success both administratively and in their operations, I think will help Deschutes County as a whole.
When were we promised those last results? Like 4 months ago?
Madam Chair, when that letter came out by the deputy director in December, I think everyone was expecting in the spring. I have not heard an update, so presumably we'll get some results this fall. But we're all anxiously awaiting kind of what those results are from those monitoring tests.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
So for this next one, thanks, Peter. For this next one, community justice, DV could not be here. She had a prior engagement this afternoon. However, she's been very involved in drafting this list. She met in person with Doug and I a few weeks back, as well as continual email updates on these. So Doug's going to run through these real quick. And in the interest of time, we realize we're running really late on our agenda items. So we'll go at the pace that works for you. But Doug can highlight the community justice bullet points here.
Thank you. But honestly, this is so important because it is the long session. So to me, I don't care how much time we take as long as we adequately cover what we really need to worry about. So thank you, Doug.
Sure. I think we can cover this fairly quickly, but also be respectful of the importance of these items. Community corrections, obviously, we have had long conversations with, and we've worked very closely with Dee and her team. We've been very involved in a statewide work group with the DOC, with AOC. There is a cost study that has just been released on community corrections that was very positive from a county perspective. In fact, I think it surprised most of us when it came out. It will be the subject of legislative review over the next couple months. And then we'll have to wait and see if the cost study recommendations are in the governor's budget. There have been numerous discussions between county officials and legislators in key positions who are concerned with a number of items, including whether or not Multnomah County has been, in particular, living up to the expectations from a legislative standpoint. And we continue to work with our fellow county officials in Multnomah County on that issue. I personally have met with the two co-chairs of the Ways and Means Subcommittee on Public Safety, Paul Evans and Janine Solman, on this issue. We've coordinated a meeting. Deschutes County helped coordinate a meeting with AOC and DOC staff here about a week and a half ago, and we'll continue to work on this. But obviously, in the context of everything that we're talking about in this entire set of bullet items, these are important issues that we need to track and be cognizant of. But I think, DV has testified before the committee a couple times. The commissioners have been, engaged and involved in those efforts as well. And this is something that, with the direction from the commission, we'll continue to be involved in.
So the bullet point for medical examiner system work group, that's something that matters here. It's an evolving need in the population growth area we are, and AOC is kind of taking that up. So we will be bringing that to a AOC committee meeting next month, and probably the legislative also. And it boils down to reimbursing miles for rural counties, just moving bodies around, but also advocating for Lane County's next facility, which is a regional opportunity, because following that would be Central Oregon or Eastern Oregon. Right. So those are the two things it looks like.
I'll go back up to the second bullet point was diversion of treatment options for juveniles. The one common theme I'm hearing from legislators and from people around the state is the shocking lack of resources available for adolescent behavioral health. It's bad enough with adults. It is, doubly more difficult or triply more difficult to find behavioral health specialists who are experts in adolescent behavioral health challenges. And unfortunately, what we've seen in the last 3 or 4 years is young people having greater access to the types of substances that get them addicted relatively quickly. So there are two things going on here that I wanted to share. Number one is an effort to make sure that we adequately fund efforts in the adolescent behavioral health world. And number two, there's a workforce issue. The local workforce boards, including East Cascades here in Central Oregon, have been at the table on an effort that we helped coordinate. We had a first meeting 2 weeks ago to talk about behavioral health workforce, especially when it comes to youth behavioral health, both inside and outside the schools. So how do we have enough qualified personnel to be able to address the growth and the need? So I've got another meeting coming up in October, I think on the 3rd. The counties are at the table. The behavioral health groups are at the table. The CCOs are coming to the table, and legislators are going to be coming to the table. So the effort is to coordinate efforts overall in this regime. So you'll notice a number of items in this list deal with youth, and adolescent behavioral health in particular is something that needs to be addressed.
So Doug, the facility in Prineville through Rimrock, I know they were having a workforce issue. I haven't checked with them recently. Do you know, are they still dealing at half staff? Is that the problem?
Chair, I don't know specifically for Rimrock, but I know that in my conversations with other behavioral health providers and mental health providers for youth programs, that's a common refrain. They just cannot find the staff to even meet, they might have a 10 or a 12 or a 14 or a 20 bed capacity, but they can't staff up to this because there's state and federal requirements. You must have a certain number of staff for the number of youth at all times if it's a residential facility. And it's very difficult to find the number of staff to be able to staff up fully.
I know, I think there was something, they were limited to like 8 or something. I mean, it was really incredibly short of what the need is. So are we now to the DA?
Well, I'll touch on just the governor's going to ask for funding for impacts grants. Obviously, that's something that the county is taking advantage of. Justice Information System modernization, aid and assist are also important. So these are all key topic areas. I won't go into detail unless you want to, because we're over time, I think.
Those are all, I mean, pretty much all of those bullets are really important items.
So what about aid and assist? What are they? It's there. What are we talking about?
Well, aid and assist, the entire aid and assist population has been woefully underfunded.
Right.
And that's been a common refrain of the counties for a long period of time. And I have not been in those discussions, but I know that AOC and individual commissioners have been in those discussions. We know that recommendations are being provided to the governor to adequately fund aid and assist and the aid and assist population. That mixes right in with the whole deflection program that we want to make sure that we cover, the behavioral health program, the mental health program that we have in our county. So we'll have to wait and see where the governor's budget comes in December, but certainly that'll be a priority, and AOC has it on their list as well.
Okay.
I
Rickos?
mean, we also have health services team members, behavioral health director.
Come on up.
Thank you, Holly.
Good afternoon, Holly Harris, Behavioral Health Director. So the aid and assist issue has just been a rising issue over the last several years. One of the big changes that occurred was around the Mossman order that really changed the length of stay that folks can stay in the state hospital. So many of those individuals flooded back to communities, still very ill, needing a lot of support. So the community, what's referred to as community restoration, those numbers have just been skyrocketing and skyrocketing across the state. We have, I think, one of the stronger aid and assist programs in the state. We've been managing it quite well, but kind of with creativity and partnerships and the way we do things here in Central Oregon, really just trying to do everything possible to support these individuals in our community without necessarily adequate resources. But certainly the funding has not been there. And in other parts of the state, and certainly our the I-5 corridor area, where their numbers have just really gone through the roof. It's a real challenge. So any funding in that area is welcomed. I'm not sure I totally see too much of a relationship with the deflection issue as much, because really that's primarily focused on substance use. Many of those folks are not necessarily entering the aid and assist realm, though there could be some overlap depending on the individual and what they're presenting with. So really those buckets of money, we want to make sure those deflection monies go into deflection. Aid and assist is really a separate kind of beast on its own.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I mean, while you're there, and while we're talking about deflection, and while the Impacts Grant Program is on this list, I know that the Impacts Program was used as a vehicle for some of the work envisioned through House Bill 4002. But we've known the Impacts Program for a long time as a source of funding for the Stabilization Center. This $15 million request from the governor's office, does that preserve both of those things that we need out of the Impacts Program? And B, is that enough money?
I think that's something for us to watch really carefully because I could see very easily where these two issues get conflated because they are under one umbrella of an impacts grant program. We really need to be watching this to make sure that 10 million original investment that went to fund programs like the Stabilization Center, that 10 million remain for those successful programs, and that any increase in impacts that they need to designate it specifically for deflection or one of these other programs. They are technically two separate grant programs under impacts umbrella. So hopefully the funding will remain consistent with those. But I can see where it could get confusing really quickly.
Yeah, we did, Commissioner, we did hear on the AOC legislative update last Monday that the governor's plan is to request to double the amount of money for deflection implementation. So there was $25 million requested and appropriated by the legislature this last June. And the governor plans to come in and ask for $50 million for deflection. And that will cover additional costs that current counties have, as well as trying to bring some of the counties that did not sign up initially into the fold. So it seemed like on the call that the county folks were pleasantly surprised by that request. I'm not sure it's sufficient, but certainly it's necessary.
So you think the 15 million will be designated for those original impacts programs?
Right. The way they described it on the call was deflection requests going from 25 to $50 million and impacts being a separate $15 million request.
Okay. Do I think it's enough? No. But well, I mean, that would be great though still, because I mean, we've pretty much been in a scenario where we're just hoping for the 10 million to get refunded each year. So to actually have an increase means they're keeping it on the table for at least what's existing, which is good. I mean, with our increased costs, as you know, at the Stabilization Center, personnel costs, health insurance costs, all the things that everybody's experiencing, to stay flat with what we've been getting is really a decrease. So I think 5 million would be helpful in keeping existing programs up and running, but it would not necessarily allow for new programs, I don't think, to be able to come on in any meaningful way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions on the community justice? We'll move quickly to district attorneys. So turn it back over to Doug.
I'm going to punt on this one because I haven't spent a lot of time on the discovery cost issue, but happy to either allow Jen to go into great details, right? Yeah. And we don't.
AOC is up on this one big time too. So that this was another committee topic that came up, and it was a full rundown. And yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna be able to speak substantively on it, but as I say, it's on the list for AOC following this one.
Right. Yeah, I think several of these items are on the list, like the National Flood Insurance Plan are on the list to make sure that you guys are up to speed and aware of what's going on, but someone else will be carrying the water. So we would be in a supportive role was the idea. And I had my notes on this from the meeting and I can't find them. So yeah, go ahead.
Great. For the next one, finance, Robert is out of the office today. He has also been very involved in drafting the bullet points here. He met with Doug and I together a couple weeks ago, as well as, particularly on the HB 4056, has been keeping us updated on the process of that. And then for the first one, I'm going to turn it over to Doug to talk about these issues, but the first one for the CAFA funding, Scott Langton was going to try to be here and then got pulled out on Friday afternoon to a different meeting for today. So he wasn't able to come here as well for that. But Doug can brief on the CAFA. And then for HB 46, if you have questions or need further elaboration, Doug's also been very involved in this. And we have Kim Riley, also part of the working group, as well as Judy. She's in the room too. So we have people here who can further elaborate on some of these bullet points.
Yeah, just really quickly on CAFA, I rely on the experts to come up later and go into the great details, but this is another example where the cost of providing a service is not kept up with the cost of inflation. And so that's the goal here. On House Bill 4056, you recall this is the property tax foreclosure money that came out of the Hennepin decision in Minnesota. There was a bill passed, House Bill 4056, that required a work group to get together, and that work group has met probably 5 or 6 times. We've had witnesses and participants from all walks of life come in and talk about that. The property tax advocates, the counties have been very involved and at the table. The Department of Revenue has been running the work group, and they've come up with a report that kind of regurgitates what everyone has said. We have not yet seen the final recommendations, but among the recommendations will be basically delegating the authority for distributing excess tax revenues after foreclosure through the state treasurer, Department of Treasury. So we'll see what the final results of that will be, but we have been sitting at the table, and Kim might want to comment further, or Robert if he comes in at a later point.
No, I think that's a pretty accurate summation. I think until we actually see what the recommendations are from the legislature, I don't have anything more to add. The work group brought a lot of ideas to the table, and some that are conflicting, some from special interest groups that aren't in line with the counties. So seeing where the legislature is going to fall on those concepts is going to be helpful to see.
Mm-hmm.
And just remember, it's those states that did this. It's, what is it? Was it 12 of them or something in the country? Right. We also have a very progressive inheritance tax in the state. So, and I keep wondering if those are the same groups. And they probably are. What, do you know, Doug? Yeah, we're in both categories. So yes.
Behavioral health, we kind of touched on this. This is, very connected with everything else we're doing as far as, the topics we raised earlier. I don't know if Holly wants to come back up. And Janice, that's right, Janice is here as well. I will say that there are a couple items that I think are very important that we've kind of alluded to already. The whole idea of being able to license and get people into the state to do this complicated work has been an ongoing issue. There was a bill to streamline the licensing process last session and to allow for compacts between states. That bill did not pass, and the legislature directed the powers that be to go back and come back with some more recommendations. But I that kind of fits into the whole workforce issue that we continue to talk about. So that's a huge issue. Child psychiatric services, as Commissioner Chang mentioned, Representative Sanchez had a bill, House Bill 3126 from a couple sessions ago. I've spoken with her staff about reintroducing the bill. I don't know if they had been planning to reintroduce the bill, but I'm hoping that they will. So we'll see here in a few weeks, and maybe after the meeting, she's more encouraged to do so.
She made no commitments during that meeting, but Representative Levy has filed a legislative concept, right? To basically pick that up if Representative Sanchez doesn't want to introduce the bill. She came to the meeting with her Ways and Means hat on, and was
there's no money,
very tight fisted about money, at the same time that she was very sympathetic to the cause. So.
Yeah, what I would tell her, and I've told her this before, is that's the kind of bill that if you don't pass, you'll spend more money. I mean, that's the problem that we often have with Ways and Means. They don't want to invest $10 this year because it'll cost $10. But if you don't invest $10 this year, next year it's going to be 15, and 2 biennium from now it's going to be 25. So instead of bending that cost curve down from 10 to 8, we end up spending 20. So. Anyway, that's my soapbox for the day.
One of the arguments we could make was, there may be host sites that are willing to contribute land. There may be private builder operators who might be willing to share the cost of this, so that we're not asking the state to cover the entire thing and $14 million or whatever. We're asking the state for a chunk. And that chunk, what it leverages is quite a good investment. So,
one just last data point before I turn it over to the experts here. I saw a study that was presented this last session. In 2014, there were 51 youth residential programs in the state, many of them small, 4 to 6 or 8 beds in many rural communities, especially. Jay Barjay, of course, is still here and provides excellent service, but there were a lot of smaller services, 51 as of 2014. Today, there are 7 operating youth residential facilities in the state.
In the entire state. So
the
you're
entire
talking
state.
51 and 14 all over the state.
Down to
And now we're down to 7
Rural.
statewide,
statewide.
urban and rural. Yeah, level 3, 4, and 5 residential programs.
Wow.
I digress.
Well, that's discouraging, isn't it? It's almost like the number of lumber mills we have left. So,
Well, and I think, when we talk about this issue, we have to think about administrative burden as well and some of the requirements that are associated with, running these facilities, operating them. We lose workforce as a result of it. I mean, it's really, it comes back down to a workforce issue. So we really, without solving that issue, we're not going to solve any of these other issues because you can build all the facilities in the world, but if you can't staff them, you can't operate them.
Anything else that you want to talk about on the list?
Oh, sorry. I'm at classes. Yeah. So, I mean, and then again, the workforce issue with the licensing. I mean, we have a lot of self-imposed barriers for how we're not able to get the workforce up and running as quickly as we need them to, hire them as easily as we need to, just lots of duplicative efforts of licensing, credentialing, background checks. A lot of these things really slow or completely hinder the process of being able to get qualified, eager people to work to do this important work. So I think that's really critical that some of these things are being addressed. And then we already talked about deflection. So yeah, and we're still continuing to, move forward with our local efforts around getting a child psychiatric facility in our region. So, I mean, if the child psychiatric bill were to be reintroduced, I mean, it would just, I think, propel our efforts forward even more, but we will continue to keep working on it locally because it's a dire need.
Isn't it the top of our list, honestly?
Yeah,
mean-
it's definitely, I mean, we have so many things on the list. I mean, it's definitely at the top. But again, I think without workforce, and the conversations that we're having around the child psychiatric facility that we want to have here, workforce is still coming up as a #1 barrier and problem that we're going to need to solve in order to make that program successful, even if we are able to get funding and land and all the things that are going to be needed to get it built. Without a workforce, there's no point. So we have to get this workforce issue addressed in a meaningful way, both short-term, midterm, and long-term. So some of the strategies that AOC MHP is, looking at is, working with the higher ed universities around career paths to work in community mental health. Because what's happening now is we're having people go through higher ed and, leaving to go right into private practice. And without a pathway or even a conversation in graduate school around what it means to work in community mental health, requiring internships to happen at community mental health. I mean, these are really important training grounds for new clinicians, that it's not just that we need workforce, but it's actually really makes for a stronger workforce by having worked in community mental health. So those are the types of long-term strategies we're looking at to build up a workforce for the future. But we need money now to really invest in some shorter term solutions. We also need to probably look at still pay equity and how hiring bonuses and other things like that can, play into that. It gets really complicated around pay equity to be able to offer those types of things. So those would be some quick fixes because we are competing against organizations that are offering hiring bonuses, that are offering retention bonuses, that are offering housing stipends, offering all of these types of incentives. And in this environment today, we need to be able to compete with that in order to be successful, but we also need long-term strategies for how we're going to address this going forward.
So, Holly, is there a program at OSU Cascades?
There's they have they have a counseling program, but it is nowhere near geared towards community mental health.
Okay.
So there's not
distance learning program is more geared towards community mental health.
And so there's opportunities with higher ed to build relationship with community mental health programs, to build pathways and incentives that to a scholarship type programs where we, like they do in the medical field, where often, doctors or nurses will go and work in the public sector and they get their tuition, paid for, or, with stay agreements and things like that. That's a way to build the workforce long-term and also build a really quality workforce.
Okay, let's go to lunch with OSU Cascades then.
Okay.
But there are, Janice Garceau, Director of Health Services, there are There is a work group meeting now to address the administrative burden piece that's addressing a number of these issues that directly impact workforce. But simultaneous to that work group meeting, the Health Authority continues to roll out new programming with new requirements attached. And we're just not getting much traction with really getting good coordination there. So that's an issue that I think we just have to keep in front of legislators and keep giving them factual, concrete examples of how this is not working as intended. So a lot of work was done last legislative session to pass a bill, and we're working against ongoing rolling out of programs. The next one to have on the radar is the SPA that will address certified community behavioral health clinics, which they want to expand in Oregon. That's a great thing. They're talking about adding additional requirements there. Thankfully, listening to some CCBHCs that are operating, but it's just another thing to keep an eye on. And then the last piece I'll say, and I don't know if there's a legislative fix for it, but the legislature permitted all of OHA staff to work from home for into perpetuity. And there's been a real loss of collaborative, boots on the ground, effective work with people working from their home office. That is an opinion, but I'll tell you that we are feeling the impact of that. And if there can be any advocacy around getting some change there, I think it might make a difference in effectiveness.
Janice, thank you so much for saying that. They have a building in Salem that could hold 1,600 people. And I believe I've been told that there are only 82 people, maybe 82 people working there in person. And you lose it because we see it at the LGAC meetings I attend. So many people that are the head of the state, they are not at the meeting. They're in their kitchen elsewhere. And you need that. You need to be in the same room together. I think we could get so much more accomplished.
And they're expanding their workforce regularly. I mean, the Health Authority has grown and there was probably some expansion that was needed, but I think it requires some scrutiny, honestly. They're hiring people out of the behavioral health field to have good work-life balance, doing administrative roles, while people on the ground are struggling under the burden of the work in the community, which has only gotten harder. So whatever can be done to continue to raise that issue to legislators, I think we need to do that.
Doug, did you hear that? No, honestly, we have to do something. It's just not right. So thank you, Janice, for bringing that up. I see it. Yeah, I see it. And I know you live and breathe it.
I mean, that kind of work expectations, work conditions stuff. I mean, is that legislative or is that we need the director of the department to take the agency in a new direction?
You know better. You may know better than we do. I am not a legislative expert. I know that the authority was able to anchor that permission to allow staff to work from home in some official way. I thought it was an actual passing of a rule or some legislative action. We can look into that. But the more people you have in administrative roles, and I'm saying this as an administrator, the more they can scrutinize programs on the minutia of the work and the less people are available to actually do the work that the community wants us to do. And that's what we need more of. So whatever we need to do to get that balance right, I don't think we're there yet.
I would just offer one comment, which is I've heard a lot from people on this very topic over the last several weeks. And there's a growing frustration, not just here, but elsewhere, that, the phones are going unanswered and rule makings are taking too long. And I will say that I was in the OHA DHS building a few weeks ago, and entire floors the lights are off because there's no one there.
There's no one there.
And then you turn, yeah. So you walk in and the lights turn on only when you walk in or you get off the elevator. So, I'm not the expert on this, but I'll certainly check on that. But it is a topic, I think, maybe for AOC to start asking for AOC to communicate to their state partners that we are not getting the kind of service that our constituents need. We're not getting a timely service. And so that, I think that is an issue that AOC as a body could raise with.
Okay, so there was an audit by someone. They spent $57 million to Deloitte, And within that $57 million bill that Oregon Health Authority spent with Deloitte, they were paying $295 an hour to pay someone at Deloitte to answer the phone. I do remember that because I'm like, oh, it's a serious problem. And, you know, we're at the bottom of the list for a lot of things that we really have some great people, but they definitely need some serious help.
My impression was that this local government advisory committee that AOC asked to get restarted, the LGAC, you know, a big part of the focus there was fix OHA. And so I haven't been, you know, they're Friday morning meetings, and I have other kinds of work groups that I have to participate on a regular basis on Fridays. So I haven't been tracking that process very much, but
Commissioner, I'm the health department, one of the health department members of the LGAC. And I would say that early on, there may have been a focus on fixing the OHA. I think now there's a lot of deference. I think that's just the nature of relationships. And you know, OHA is doing hard work and in a tough role and under lots of scrutiny, but I don't know that I see opportunity for fixing some of these concerns, although it's probably one of the places where the most relevant conversations are happening. But it's really hard in a meeting like that to confront things like people aren't at their desks, people aren't returning emails, without feeling like you're calling out a director of a state agency as one community mental health member of that committee.
Well, I was told at the last meeting that we weren't in the bottom of the nation for behavioral health beds, and that we had moved up.
We may have.
Where are we at now?
I don't know. We may have.
I Googled it.
Yep,
I
the
couldn't
bottom
find.
may not be what we want to aspire to. So
Yeah, well, I couldn't find those articles that they were referring to, you know, and I'm looking on several sources trying to, okay, where is it say that we're now no longer 47th, we're now up to 39th, you know? I can't find it.
prevention dollars, or are you going to get to that?
The one last thing I want to say about this is the AOC's director, Gina Nickel, I mean, wanting OHA to be a functioning agency and a good partner to counties is a real passion of hers. And so I don't know what that looks like to try to, you know, just kind of make these concerns, you know, raise these concerns with her and ask her what we can do or what AOC can do. But I would like us to try to tap her and activate her on our behalf.
She's in those meetings as well with Commissioner Adair and I and others, and is often sort of cheering in the background when community mental health directors are talking about some of these issues. But it's hard to know then where to take that into actual action. So I can reach out to her independently. She'll be responsive.
It's her field. It's her passion. And she actually, I don't think it's been at the last two meetings for other commitments in her life, but she definitely, it's wonderful having her there. And that's how I know that she tells me that Pendleton, the state hospital there, used to be one of the best. It was one that actually accomplished things. Patty, she would go, it worked. They did such a wonderful job, and yet the state closed that down 10 years ago, pretty much so. There's a little bit left, but not, you know, nothing that's really going to help on a numbers basis.
Yes, please reach out to her.
Okay.
And if one or the other of you is going to be at the AOC annual conference this year, let's try and get some side time with Gina.
One last topic that I had put on Doug's radar and wanted to make sure that I raised here is that we've been doing it around the subject of youth addiction, mental health issues, is the topic of prevention dollars. Prevention dollars have really not increased significantly in almost a decade. We historically were able to fund one substance use prevention position in public health with the dollars. We have a little bit more now, but it is only just lagged just behind the cost of one role. Given what we've seen in the community with the opioid epidemic, with the increased use of marijuana, with some of the concerns about the intersection between youth mental health and youth early engagement in substance use disorders, I think it's really woefully underfunded. So if there is an effort on the part of AOC MHP or AOC to really ask the governor to make some commitments around prevention dollars for youth and adult substance use, I think that merits attention. Maybe there'll be a POP, maybe there'll be some other effort, but it's time. There's been investment in some work around substance use treatment. There were the investments around the behavioral health resource networks associated with the Measure 110 bill, and then more recently in deflection. But we really, really need to focus on upstream prevention. It's not a very compelling topic because it can take years to see the impact. But if you're not doing it, you're going to see the outcome in your youth mental health facilities and drug and alcohol facilities down the road. So any attention to that would be appreciated, and we'll make you aware of any bills that are coming online.
And are you talking about what kind of prevention work that happens in among Jessica Jack's team?
Yes.
Okay.
So those dollars have historically come through the Behavioral Health Financial Assistance Awards and passed through to our prevention teams, which is how many agencies are handling those dollars. So they really have been, I mean, it's about $150,000 a year. It's a drop in the bucket in terms of what's needed.
And there's been new increased mandates around like suicide reporting, overdose reporting, that all kind of falls in the realm of prevention, like noticing trends and being able to respond to that, but no increased funding at all to support those efforts.
I'll make a little editorial comment that there used to be a program that went to all 36 counties that included prevention dollars, and that was through the county commissions on children and families. And Deschutes County had a very good commission, an excellent commission that did great work and leveraged lots of outside money to come in, lots of foundation support. So, you know, if I recall, Deschutes County leveraged state dollars 2 or 3 to 1 every single year. And there was a lot of prevention dollars that came in. Every county got a base. And that was eliminated in the governor's budget in 2011. And there's been no replacement essentially for those behavioral health. So, I mean, at least I'm heartened to see that we've had some prevention dollars in Deschutes County. Many counties have zero at all. But that's a really good point and something I think is very important. We've gotten behind on investing in youth, as I've talked to you about in the past. There'll be an effort to say, you know, we need a dramatic increase in youth behavioral health workforce. I know there's going to be an effort to increase funding for school-based mental behavioral health support. And we have school-based health professionals here in Deschutes County. And then also an effort to say that some percentage of money we're spending on housing and homelessness ought to be going into homeless youth. Because we, in the state, we invest very little in homeless youth programs. And that's really the key to bending the curve down of adult homelessness, is you've got to intervene with teens and adolescents who are at risk of being homeless. Because that's the number one indicator of long-term adult homelessness. Anyway, sorry to digress.
No, that's.
I'm not doing a very good job in.
No.
keeping
I
on track.
like hearing that. Oh, well, I don't like hearing, but the fact that it was eliminated in 2011, isn't that amazing that they haven't realized that we really need to do something? Yeah, that's really too bad. Are we to the road department yet or not?
Public health.
Okay, so can we take a 2-minute break? Because I just heard this thing that it said you never should sit for longer than 2 hours. It's not. We're at public health priorities.
Hi, Tom Kuhn from Public Health. Good to see you. I just have a short list here that I can run through quickly. I'm sure you can imagine.
What Doug said.
No, this will
Here we
be,
go.
this will be short. And I'm sure you can imagine what our top priority is. Again, this biennium is like many of the last bienniums, public health modernization. And the reason it's continues to be a big priority is the investment for this upcoming biennium is only $5 million. And the thing is, that's being divided up between community-based organizations, tribes, Oregon Health Authority, and then local public health. So when it's being 5 million is being divided up like that, and then it gets divided up amongst all the local public health authorities, it mostly is just covering cost of living increases at that point. So it's flat. Yeah, if that. So it's almost like flat funding again versus us achieving modernization through more programs that we could fund. We continue to fund things such as communicable disease control and prevention, prevention and health promotion, environmental health, emergency preparedness, epidemiology, and those are the primary areas that we are funding with that funding, but we would like to be able to do some other things as well. So CLO will be pushing hard for an increase in modernization funding, and I'll definitely be coming during the session to ask for letters of support and testimony and so forth to really see if we can get that dollar amount bumped up. So.
If I could, oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
Is that in the governor's recommended budget or something? Like, how do you know that number already?
Yes, it is in the budget that's being proposed at this time.
But the governor's recommended budget isn't out yet, is it?
Commissioner, I think I can clarify.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
What, that's in the POP. So the policy option package, the department has prepared for the governor. And you're right, the governor's budget will come out on December 1st or thereabouts. Part of the reason that this POP and others that people feel are important is so low is the governor limited agencies to an increase of no more than 1%. So agencies in many cases did not even suggest POPs for things that are important. Or they, in this case, they cut the POP way back to fit within their overall 1%. So they had to make very difficult choices.
Yeah.
So,
And not
but
keeping up with inflation.
yeah, right. So, but I do think that this is something that has so much legislative interest that I would be shocked if we end up at $5 million. So it would be nice if it were higher. I wish it were higher, but it's understandable why the agency was limited in being able to support a higher number.
And I think one of the things that, just to remind you all of some of the history, last legislative session, modernization was initially scheduled to get something close to $200 million, and I think ended up getting 50 million.
50 million.
Yeah. And, the entire public health reinvestment was built around modernization as a concept. And that really is about making sure that we're staying on top of communicable diseases. Actually, stop is a good term to use in that context. And on vaccination rates and on access to healthcare and on environmental threats like water, climate, smoke, fire. So it's pretty critical programming and was part of a lengthy process whereby public health was re-envisioned and then the investments just never came. I hate to say it sounds like a familiar story, but it does. Community mental health was re-envisioned at 1.2 and the investments didn't come, and you can see where we are. So it's important that we keep reminding them that this was a commitment to the health of our communities and that we're funding really critical, important services in the community that are mandated through these funds, and they just haven't followed the planning process. So,
Janice, Tom, I mean, would it be accurate to say if this is all we get for public health modernization, it means that public health to maintain level of service will be asking for a larger general fund contribution. Or reducing services. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So.
Okay, so much more to come on that one. There is some funding for domestic well safety. That's clean water. And that mostly goes towards the lower Umatilla basement groundwater management area. However, there will be some funds that will be available also statewide to do some work with some rural residents that are experiencing water insecurity due to contaminated drinking water. So there may be some trickle down to that, even though the bill is mostly focused on the Umatilla Basin. So that's something we'll pay attention to as well. And just one last thing here is that the CCO 3.0 language, which is under ORS 414.572, it's in draft form, but there's language that's going to be added that will require that a county commissioner and either a public health or behavioral health professional be on CCO governing boards. So it's in very much draft form at this time, but we think that'd be great to also have like a public health or behavioral health professional on those boards as well to give that viewpoint and expertise. So,
because that's not the case right now.
It's right now, the local mental health and local public health authority is represented by the elected officials on the board. And they have had to, some of them have decided to sort of cede or designate their seat to a public health or a behavioral health director, just because of the expertise of those individuals. But I think AOC and commissioners have felt that that's a very disempowering decision to have to make. So ideally, you have your local public health expert or your local behavioral health expert and your elected officials who represent the people of the community on these important boards that make decisions like what is the plan for public health and behavioral health in the region. So I wasn't aware of that one, but I certainly would be a fan. I'd be interested in our commissioner's perspective on that.
It'd be great for the county to have more voices and more representation on that body.
And not have it be an either or.
Yeah.
Which it is in many counties. And I think commissioners have felt really not at the table in counties where they don't have a seat.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that concludes my update for public health at this time.
Thank you so much for your patience.
Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
And for this next one with roads, we have Chris Doty, who's joining us virtually. I
You
believe
didn't want to
he's
stay in the room till 4 o'clock?
apparently not.
I can't believe
We-
that.
I believe he's still there. Yeah. Okay, great. We'll patch him in.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Doty, thank you for your patience.
Hey, good afternoon. Sorry, I was in Zoom purgatory there for a second.
There you go.
What'd I miss?
Just introducing you on the topic.
Okay, all right. Well, I think we're all pretty aware of the top priority as it relates to transportation. The funding package that is being discussed. The Joint Committee on Transportation was here last Thursday as part of their kind of statewide tour to gather information about what that might look like. I think we were well represented as a region in showcasing some of the issues, what's working good, what's not working good, have a nice conversation about it there at OSU Cascades last Thursday. So we drove home our points of advocating for really a sizable adjustment as it relates to what we've lost from inflation. Just given the 40% increase, 40 to, I've heard 70 even from contractors, percent increase in inflation since 2017. And, the advocacy of the 50-30-20 sharing of state highway fund revenue, it's historically been the case. So, for us, this is the number one issue, and really others haven't emerged as it relates to anything that would divert our additional effort towards this. This will be a full court press to and through the session.
Is that a basketball term?
Oh, pardon?
I was just kidding. You really think they're going to try and change that up then, don't you? I mean, they've been hinting at it for a while.
Yeah, we'll see. The biggest issue is Oregon Department of Transportation has massive deficit issues on their ops and maintenance side. Even more massive deficit issues related to projects they're delivering from House Bill 2017 in the I-5 corridor, Rose Quarter area. And, you know, the numbers are staggering. And so, you know, our fear is we're going to get lost in that conversation. You know, but what we're trying to remind the legislators is that, you know, they are actually need to advocate for us just like they advocate for ODOT. We don't have local funding tools to generate transportation dollars. Can't use franchise fees, restricted from using property tax if there was even any capacity to do so, which there's not. Transportation utility fees aren't practically implemented in counties, nor are local gas taxes. All the fuel stations for the most part are in cities. The only, you know, local funding tool that exists is we can possibly do a surcharge to a registration fee. That's been done in Clackamas County. The state statute may not actually include our county yet as far as being under a certain threshold to allow us to do that. So, you know, they are speaking for us, and we need to keep reminding them of that fact. ODOT's definitely controlling, you know, the narrative as it relates to the big issues in the state. Local government needs this just as badly. You know, we just don't have the massive machine that they do at present to communicate that.
All right. All right. I'll talk to you later about some of our little projects that are
Additionally,
they
there's a bullet
contributing to
on
the
here.
inflation factor?
Yeah. Additionally, there's a bullet on here, a board for SRS and PILT advocacy. This is federal advocacy that's just tacked on. Commissioner Chang, looking forward to kind of hearing from you about your experience in Washington, D.C. Last week as well in that advocacy.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, if we're talking about what are we focusing on with the state legislature starting in December, January, that's a sort of side story. But I mean, you know, since it's come up, I can very quick. I was going to report back in other items that there were 3 Oregon commissioners in Washington, D.C. for the NACO, PILT, and SRS fly-in. We had a lot of good discussions, and you know, we heard basically, well, we got SRS into the Farm Bill in the House, but the Farm Bill's not going to pass. So not sure what the other options are. And then on the Senate side, they hotlined SRS through the Senate, but then when that went over to the House Ways and Means Committee wasn't ready to move it forward yet. So that's the story on SRS. And you know, Chris, I also should report back that there are I heard from counties that had set up like this separate county road agency that the gig is up for them, and they did not receive their funding through that channel this year. On PILTs, you know, there seemed to be less concern about PILT passage, but you know, it you know, that doesn't mean there's no concern, and not clear, you know, again, also on that front, not clear when we'll know and what the pathway will be. But you know, one of the things that I thought was pretty interesting was learning about how much PILT and how much SRS comes to Oregon and to Deschutes County. And I just would report back that in Oregon, we get $30 million of PILT across the 36 counties, and Deschutes County gets over 10% of that. So, you know, this handout from NACO says last year was $3.6 million. So, you know, 30 million total for the state of Oregon. We get over 10% with 3.6 million. That means it's pretty important for us to be advocating for PILT funding. And then on on secure rural schools, the state of Oregon gets, I guess, well, let me just make the comparison at the federal level. The state of Oregon gets almost a third of the total SRS funding for the nation, $272 million for the US. 81 of that goes to the state of Oregon. Of the 81 that goes to the state of Oregon, only 1.1 comes to Deschutes County. So, it's important to us, but there should be a lot of other counties who are going to Washington, D.C. to advocate for SRS from Oregon that weren't there. So I'll be bringing that up at AOC. But just to give you a sense of some of the numbers that we're looking at, this is a total of well over $4 million a year for Deschutes County from these programs, and those, as we know, much of that funding goes into road operations and maintenance. So really important dollars for Deschutes County, and I hope that we can continue. I did a little advocacy while I was there, but I hope that the county can continue to advocate to our congressional delegation for those fund sources.
Okay. Well, Chris, does that make you feel better?
No. No, it's Commissioner Chang's point. If SRS were to go away, we still would be legally entitled to actual percent of timber harvest, and our gap is a couple $100,000. So we're, it does help us quite a bit. Payment in lieu of taxes is certainly the program that hurts if not extended for us.
Yes, the 3.6 million. That's definitely a hole. Are we now to go natural
Biggest piece
resources?
of non-state highway fund revenue that we have in our budget is our federal allocations. So. Okay, well, thank you, board.
Thank you, Chris.
Well, I think we kind of already covered the wildfire maps, but obviously it's an ongoing issue. I don't think we've seen, I think Peter is gone now, but we haven't seen the final versions, but they're interconnected with the national flood insurance concerns, and also with the ADU issue. So, I mean, three topics are kind of converging as a set of concerns.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I want to say I don't necessarily think the maps are our legislative focus for this session. The maps have been approved by the State Department of Forestry. So I think what should be our focus for the coming legislative session is, number one, overall wildfire funding. The legislature that had a kind of crisis work group that tried to come up with a program, a formula to make state firefighting capacity whole last short session, and they crashed and burned, so to speak. But they did create a work group, and I would assume that work group is going to produce recommendations for legislation this coming session. So I think we want to make sure that we come out with a package that is both fair to our constituents in Deschutes County, but also which deals with the shortfall in capacity that we have. I mean, right now we're seeing we're at the tail end of fire season, hopefully. But we're seeing the state and federal governments really struggle to cover all of the fronts that they have to face right now. So we really need to get that wildfire funding package passed. I also, I want to bring attention to this neighborhood wildfire protection cooperative grant program and certification program that I believe Senator Golden is going to reintroduce in the next session. So technical assistance for whole neighborhoods. It'll actually synergize really well with all the fire safe community work that we already have going in Deschutes County. And then these whole neighborhoods would receive a certification from the state, which the state can't mandate a certain amount of discount, but this certification would entitle those neighborhoods, residents of those neighborhoods, to discounts on their insurance premiums.
Okay, and I noticed that we don't have anything listed for juniper removal. And I know we really did a big push and it didn't really happen, but we have 5 million of them. I did a calculation. They're sucking up 55 billion gallons of water a year. 55 billion gallons of water a year. That's the 5 million that really don't need to be here. So I don't know. I would hope that Crook and Jefferson and us together could be looking at some help with that issue.
Yeah.
Did they not talk to you about that?
Chair, this wasn't on the internal list generated by the county staff, but we can certainly add it. And I will
Okay.
say there, all 7 projects got delegated to soil and water conservation districts. All 7 projects had boots on the ground in the spring and plans to start boots on the ground again in the fall as fire season comes to an end. And I can certainly make sure we keep you in the loop as far as a report on that, because the initial indications have been that they've been able to leverage other funding sources, federal funding in many cases, and other partnerships to go far beyond the initial plan. The holdup in this has been that the money for monitoring ran into great delays at OSU, and the money that went to COIC to help them apply for additional funding still has not been allocated. DAS has still not written the check for that a year and a half down the road. So, but those are
A year and a half down the road? Is that what you just said?
So those are issues we continue to work on, but there will be, there was a briefing of legislators on this topic 4 or 5 weeks ago, and I believe that a proposal is being drafted, and I believe it's going to be hopefully in a larger water package that will be up for consideration next session.
So I drive down Farrier Road and there are these giant bundles of cut up juniper trees. They're like somebody throw a match in them and they will ignite and whatever. I don't know who was doing that project, but it's really pathetic to see how long it has been sitting there looking like that. I believe it's BLM land. So yeah, I see these things and I see all that happen and then I see it like stops and it doesn't go anywhere.
Well, Commissioner, take a picture of it, send it to me, and give me.
I will.
But
I will take pictures.
oftentimes the wood is stacked up and they wait until the wet season to ignite it or to remove it. But I don't know that particular area.
Oh, it's been sitting there for quite a while. Yeah. And we did have a fire there a couple years ago and yeah. And I was thinking like really wonderful things were going to happen. And then when I saw it disappeared.
The best practices listed by the bill is removal of the wood after culling it. So,
and I just say, from Deschutes County's perspective, I think we should be very concerned about juniper from a fuels management perspective, less so from a water perspective. It is one of our most troubling and concerning hazardous fuels on the landscape. But if this wildfire funding package is done right, it won't just address suppression capacity. It'll also address prevention work and fuels reduction work. And so if we want to see dollars to do juniper treatments for fuels reduction purposes, then we should be paying really close attention to that wildfire funding package.
What's the status of the Capitol? Is it going to be open next year, or is it going to still be in a construction zone?
It is once again going to be under construction
during the session.
They do not expect the Capitol to be back and fully functioning until the 2026 session. I would think that it might be even longer, but
Wow.
the $367 million project is now over $1.72 billion.
What is it? 1 point what?
1.72 billion as of last spring.
So it's a bit over budget then.
Yeah. So, yeah, the estimate of 367 was the estimate was given during the Capital Construction Subcommittee in 2008. That was when the proposal was initially floated to renovate the entire building. So we're up to $1.72 billion, I think, total for this is phase 3, but they always envision 3 phases.
Could have built a new building is bigger and maybe fancier for that instead of retrofitting this one.
That has been pointed out.
Okay. Well, thank you. Yeah, I don't mind taking the time for this. This is a good kind of open session to go back and forth and really look at the big picture of all these items.
Yeah, and I would just emphasize something that Jen said at the beginning, which is we wanted to get this to you early. This is an initial list. I really appreciate the input. We'll go back and work on adding some things, taking some things out, adjusting some things, but this will be an evolutionary process, and part of it will depend on, what does AOC end up with their final list of bills they will have versus what we're going to have, and then we'll have to work with our delegation. But you'll probably see us back here again in a month or two, or sooner.
Yeah.
I would say sooner rather than later. That would be great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now let's see, that was 2 hours and it said 45 minutes on my calendar. So we really planned well. Thank you, guys. So it looks like the planning division is next on the agenda. Hi, Will.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, I'll see if I can do better. It's been.
Don't say do better.
I'll keep this brief. Thank you for your attention this afternoon. This is, of course, our planning division plan update. We come to you at least once a year and usually multiple times a year to check in with you as we begin to complete projects and direct our attention to new projects. This is to ensure that we have board direction on emerging capacity. Of course, the comprehensive plan update is beginning to enter its wrap-up phase, and we're looking for some direction on how to identify and allocate our resources. Tables 1 and 2, they're starting on page 2 of the memo, list projects that are ongoing and projects that are yet to be initiated. Some high-profile projects coming up. Of course, the clear and objective standards for housing, got a significant amount of my team working on that. At this point, the Newberry Country Plan update is something the board had identified as a priority, and we've been, per your instructions, have been waiting to see about the EPA Community Change Grant. We would try to integrate those two outreaches where that grant to come through. Dark skies certainly has been a continuing interest of the board as well as the Planning Commission. So something that we've still got on a back burner, looking to move to a front burner with your instruction. And of course, the FEMA Biological Opinion Code updates, we've come and presented to you about those. So today, really specifically, this is an opportunity for you to give us some feedback about where we've been and where we're going. And I'm looking for some specific guidance as well. And this has to do with the urbanization coordination for land divisions near urban growth boundaries. This is a topic we've come to you in the past and asked for your authorization to pursue some DLCD grant dollars. Those grant dollars have finally been indicated as to be available. There's $25,000 there should you direct us to undertake that project. And just a reminder, this was to address the question about zone changes and land divisions near urban growth boundaries. A number of participants in those processes have identified potential problems as land divisions. As cities expand, the parcelization pattern that they expand into can either facilitate or hinder urbanization. And so the question that was presented to you previously was, did you want us to start a process of public outreach, a legislative process, stakeholder, all these things could happen as part of this outreach to see what might be done to help ensure that future urbanization is orderly. And the thing that's changed since last we talked, of course, you had your joint meeting with
We had the joint meeting, and this is page 3112. And isn't that something that we said to Ben, that we need to get together on this?
Exactly. And so this has gone from kind of a more vague concept to something specifically that the city and county has expressed interest in. So I just wanted to, we're at a juncture here to accept or reject those DLCD dollars and to prioritize or deprioritize this project. So I wanted to get your feedback specifically on that today. So that's the one thing I'm hoping to come away with, but certainly interested in any of your other feedback with regard to the projects that we do.
It seems like that would be very important to move it up in priority. And the other question I have is the medical hardship. I know we have some archaic terminology. And what I found was fascinating on that page, attachment J, was that you said the manufactured dwelling could use the same subsurface sewage disposal system used by the existing dwelling. Well, why is it and those manufactured homes could be like 900 square feet. And why can they use the existing if an ADU has to have, they don't hardly ever qualify. So it seems like there's a real disconnect there. So why wouldn't everyone want to rush out and get a medical hardship instead of building an ADU that's going to cost them an arm and a leg?
Oh, it's an interesting question. So the medical hardship, the difficulty that comes with that is that it's inherently a temporary use.
But how come they don't seem to leave as fast as you might think they should?
So with medical hardships, if you think about what happens, I'll tell a story that might be about me. If I was living rurally and I had a property that was eligible and I had a relative or myself that needed medical care, I can have either a recreational vehicle or a manufactured home placed on the property to provide care to me or for me to provide care to that relative. And sometimes those are relatively short engagements, and sometimes they're lifelong engagements of people who need ongoing care. When those need for care ceases, or for example, a relative moves on to more managed care, the doctor's notes, which have to come every year to keep the use alive, cease to come, at which point those are put into our code enforcement program to ensure that those uses are decommissioned. And the code doesn't require that the manufactured home be removed from the property. It only requires that it be decommissioned as a use. So most of the time people retain these things as storage spaces. You could have your man cave, your sewing room out there. As long as nobody's spending the night, it's not being rented out. It's allowed to remain on the landscape. And so it can be relatively difficult to detect if it's been ceased to be used. Certainly we run into cases where people have misunderstood the allowance of the use, and following the relative leaving the property, they've gone and tried to rent it out. And that's a matter for code enforcement that's routinely dealt with, but it doesn't happen as often as you might think. But certainly, as identified in that item, some modernization of the language is important. There's a mismatch between what is allowed in state statute for hardships in the EFU zone and what's allowed for hardships in our local code. And some of those more relaxed opportunities that are presented by the state statute, we definitely see a demand for those in other zones for just general elder care. Under our provision, there has to be a doctor's note for a medical condition. And simply being, of aged or infirmed is an allowed category of relative help that's allowed under the state statute.
So back to the UGB areas at the edge of town. Is the idea to kind of require cluster developments, or are they required now?
They're not required now. And there is an opportunity for them. And in conversations I've had with the city on this topic, we've gone back and forth about what might be the most helpful. There's some perspectives that the default, which would be to, we're in your 10-acre zone. If you had 100 acres, making 10-acre squares is in fact a pretty reasonable way for the city to approach that in the future, because those are relatively large land holdings. In the alternative, you could force cluster subdivisions by, code action. And if you did that, you would get probably 2.5-acre parcels, but a large open space parcel, which would be potentially ideally suitable for redevelopment. So part of this project would be to reach out to stakeholders. And, right now the city of Bend has been the primary target for this engagement, but certainly the city of Sisters is looking to urban growth expansion, as well as Redmond has a formal urban reserve, but over time, these regulations, these cities are designed to grow over time with urban expansion. And so this could be something that could benefit either one jurisdiction or several of them, depending on the interest. So that outreach would be part of the beginning of it. But to your point, the primary thing that you would do is, and you see this in other contexts, is you would try to make sure that you're not putting development in the way of infrastructure corridors. So, major thoroughfares, you would try to make sure people weren't putting their houses in those kind of lines of transportation corridors. The other one would be that you would look together with the jurisdictions to see what type of land division might be suitable in those areas. And if you think about it, even though that the city of Bend currently is talking about in the 2027-28 looking to do a formal urban reserve process, there's always another one after that. So this would be something that would continue to move out as a buffer if it was adopted as a buffer beyond that urban reserve to ensure or at least encourage parcelization. And there's a wide variety of opportunities you could present that in.
Is this a known effort that's been done in the state that's kind of got its definition of how you do it, or is this kind of make it up as you go? And my thought process is the fact that if a private property owner is at the edge of the city, they're probably going to want to lean into what makes sense to make me look like I want to be urbanizable, because there's a lot of value there. So for government to come in and study it and make a plan and tell you how do you have to develop, it seems a little counterintuitive.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the concern that's come out is that, as people buy properties speculatively or own properties at the edge of the urban growth boundary, they're making an investment, certainly having your property.
Or if their families lived there for a couple generations and the city just happened to get that far. But yeah, there's a lot of scenarios.
It's definitely that scenario as well. And, coming into the city looks like more than a modest lottery winning.
Yeah.
Did you come in there? So there's obviously a lot of incentive to do it. And at the same time, not everybody gets to come in the time frame that they'd hope. So, if you missed an urban growth boundary expansion, you might think to yourself, well, my next chance to cash out is at least a decade out and maybe further. I maybe want to break it up under the MUA 10 zone. And that configuration that you might do as a sort of a second tier cash out might not be ideal for that urban growth boundary that comes out.
Yeah. So, that's the conundrum of private property rights that I would have with this decision.
Certainly. And that's why I'm here for you today, is this is something that I think isn't obvious. I mean, ultimately where it leads is telling people about, where this leads is code language that would in some way restrict or influence the way that land divisions could occur.
Yeah.
At these, within some radius of the urban growth boundary or within some distance of identified corridors.
See, because 5 acres, you put a lot of houses on 5 acres. So, I mean, if MUA 10 gets broken into 10s, I don't see a huge, there's a way to optimize it, obviously, but not so excited about putting a big project together to predefine a future urban reserve area.
Yeah, and interestingly, in the Redmond Urban Reserve, the actual urban reserve there's a preclusion against smaller divisions. So, when we talked about this previously, there was a notion that maybe encouraging smaller land divisions, clustering, leaving large open space parcels would be the preferred approach. And at least through the Redmond process and in some discussions with the city of Bend, maybe preventing the creation of 2.5 acre lots is the better, creating, these larger chunks for urbanization.
Oh yeah. Well, as I say, I'm thinking 5s and 10s, 2.5 does seem like it'd be too small, but and we don't have that zoning. If it's MUA 10, it's not 2.5s.
Right. Then you end up with, if you cluster, you could get to 2.5s. And so there might be one outcome might be to not cluster these and leave them in larger chunks that might be more suitable for urbanization. So I've thought exactly about the perspective that you've talked about. And I think that this isn't, there's some advantage to it, but the outcome isn't clear. What would be best in terms of both trying to achieve the goal as well as preserving property rights and development opportunities is something that would need to be balanced. So it would be a live legislative exercise that, may or may not succeed. depending on the board's pleasure at the end of it. But looking for your direction to see if we should start down that path.
Yeah. So there's a what, $25,000 DLCD
It's
technical assistant.
It's not nothing, and it's not enough that it should drive your choice.
Yeah, that's kind of my point. The scope of that is not big.
I think the really important thing to consider is that landowners who own property right along the edge of the urban growth boundary face a lot of uncertainty right now. They are they may know that they will get a big dividend when the urban growth boundary comes and incorporates them, but they may not know when that's going to happen. And so one of, I was talking to Kurt Schuler from Brooks Resources about this, and he said, a lot of these people, they want predictability, and it is actually reassuring for them to be brought into the urban area reserve because they know they're going to get the opportunity that they want at some point. And if it's done, if things like this coordination, things like an urban area reserve are done right, then they could proceed with some development in their property, in a way that's either clustered or kind of configured that it doesn't impede future urbanization, and they can start to cash out sooner. And benefit sooner from just a portion of their property. So those are all I think strong arguments for the urban area reserve, which we know is coming already. That the city of Bend has signaled that to us, and this process can help to start to provide that predictability to property owners earlier than that urban area reserve process. So I'm and particularly since we discussed it in our joint meeting with the city of Bend, and everyone seemed to be nodding their head as we were around the table, I think it's very appropriate to proceed with this.
Okay, so that's two that say yes. I don't know. You were a little bit more.
No, I support it. Just interesting topic.
I really appreciate your attention to this. Is there anything else from the project list that has your attention, or do you like to give us any feedback or guidance on?
I'd like to clean up our wording in the medical hardship thing. Okay, I've heard of that specific issue over on 61st Street. So I do believe we need to clean that up.
That's a relatively easy fix.
Okay, good. I'm glad to know I'm asking for something relatively easy. Thank you, Will.
These first 4 bullet points, clear and objective standards, Newberry Country Plan, Dark Skies, FEMA buy-up, they are at the top, but they are not yet initiated. I mean, realistically, how many of those are we going to be able to initiate during this work plan year?
Yeah. So the clear and objective standards for housing, of course, we received dollars, and we received a consultant from DLCD. MIG is working with us to update Title 17, our partition and subdivision ordinance, as well as our Goal 5 inventories to create these clear and objective opportunities. Just to remind you, I know it's been a while, when the requirement there is that not that we close down anything in the code, but that we open new lanes of clear and objective development that run parallel to our existing opportunities. So looking into those, we've got a number of our team working on those efforts. So that one, although you haven't seen the kickoff of the legislative efforts, that one's, according to your direction, has been running behind the scenes vigorously. The Newberry Country Plan, you had indicated an interest in, and we paused for this community change grant. Dark Skies is that's one that is second in line for somebody. So it's one that you'd previously identified, and barring any change in direction from you, we would assume to continue to be an interest of yours that we would move forward. And I think that that's a reasonable one to see us move. The FEMA biological opinion updates, we continue to learn about those. We have staff. I have a staff. Nicole Mardell is assigned to work on that as we have an opportunity. We're continuing to coordinate with our state partners to see that we're headed in the right direction in a moment of a little bit of uncertainty and guidance from FEMA. So those ones are presumed, they're up at the top because they're presumed based on your prior engagement to be ongoing interests to you, and that ones that we would look to accomplish in this fiscal year.
So I had started this medical hardship code update, just like Commissioner Dare, it sounds like. But the next couple also, the road and street projects update, just defining, we're, how roads and street development could be in the code. The next one, so they were just all this group of four at the end here. Procedures ordinance for consistency with state law pertaining to department interpretations. Well, I guess that doesn't tell us too much here, but mailing addresses and other addresses. So as I said, for whatever reason, these four jumped out, and then the wetland regulation clarification for artificially created wetlands.
I'm sorry, I have to head out to the Regional Housing Council meeting. But
We're almost done.
I'm all thumbs up on housekeeping. The next.
There you go. So as I say, those are just four that as I was flipping through them all and reading them all, I started all four of those in a row.
I thought this was fascinating, the one about how many people can actually live in a house and if you can overload the system. And I know I've done that before at the holiday time, staying with my sister, but I've heard about apartments in Bend where 3 families are living in one apartment together. So I can imagine that the landlord isn't really thrilled with that, but here we are. Do we really need to have to go on that type of a level? Clackamas County has allowing 15 people regardless of relationships. And what do we say, 5?
Yeah, so the way our code worked historically was that you were allowed to have any number of family members plus 3 unrelated people. So was one occupancy, and the other allowed occupancy was any 5 people regardless of relationship. And the state changed, and through statutory change, precludes now counties from identifying occupancy based on relationships. So right now, I think that the conclusion is that if any number of people in any sort of residential situation is suitable. And of course, particularly for Todd Cleveland, that's a concerning outcome, as well as our building official. There's been a number of different approaches following that state action. Some jurisdictions have gone to 15 as a maximum occupancy regardless of relationship. Another way that's been done is 2 per bedroom plus 2 has been a pretty common approach, but it's a difficult question. I know I certainly have lived in beyond 2 per bedroom plus 2 when I was in college.
That's true.
So people do live in a variety of ways. And at the same time, the balancing the infrastructure needs, particularly septic, but also building safety is important. And other jurisdictions have stepped into this space. But that's one that, again, there's not an obvious answer to about how to approach it. I think we're all pretty loath to tell people how to live with their families in their own houses. And at the same time,
Right.
the septic
It
systems.
seems a bit of an overreach, and yet. Okay.
Well, thanks for writing those up so clearly. As I say, I didn't just proceed and do good, I guess, is
Yeah,
the bottom line.
Did you get enough direction? Then you.
Yeah, that's my thought.
Exactly what I needed.
Yeah.
In particular, I need to come back to DLC and either tell them yes or no to their money, and I will tell them yes.
Okay, there you go.
Thank you, Will.
Thank you so much.
Oh, my gosh. Number 9, 3 o'clock. Oh, right. 4:35. Thank you for being so patient, Kyle.
Of course. For the record again, Kyle Collins, Associate Planner. Give me 1 second so I can zoom on here and share presentation. I'll try to do this pretty expeditiously. All right, there we go. So I am here today as a work session in preparation for a public hearing for our 2024 housekeeping text amendment package. All the project materials can be found at our public website. You can see the link here online for anybody that might be listening in. The board has gone through several iterations of these over the years, but just as a reminder, periodically, typically once a year, if not even more frequently, we go through a round of updates to our code. These are errors that our internal staff find. Members of the public might call out these things to us. Oftentimes there are omissions in the code or internal references that point to the wrong areas. And then finally, periodically, there are changes to state statute that we're required to incorporate in our local code. Impact-wise, there are some very minor changes to our permitted uses and the use standards in certain areas of the county in alignment principally with changes to state statute. But there are no specific state statutes or administrative rules or land use goals that apply to these changes, again, because they're not changing any particular use except as those mandated by state statutory change. I'll try to go through everything relatively quickly here. Here's a full list of all the different areas of our code, chapters of our code that are going to be affected by this proposed housekeeping package. I'm not going to go through each one individually, but you can see the full list. The first set of these amendments are what are described as Scrivener's or reference errors. As I mentioned earlier, these are again just omissions in the code. Frequently through other changes in our code, references come out of alignment, and these are intended to capture those misalignments and correct them. So again, I'm not going to go through each one individually, but you can see where those Scrivener's errors are located. Next set of amendments relate to changes in state law. This first set of amendments is related to House Bill 2192 and the associated statutory references. And it has to do with the replacement dwelling standards within our resource zones. So right now, all replacement dwellings in the exclusive farm use or forest use zones are governed by state statutory language. Our local code has come out of alignment with that over time. Some very recent changes that we're required to amend, also some changes that have come online over the last 16 months or so that we're now just getting into place. Specifically, those new replacement dwelling standards change the eligibility requirements for when houses are actually able to apply for a replacement. There's some new siting criteria for replacement dwellings in the resource zones. There are some new timelines for when replacement dwellings have to be constructed. There are new deed restrictions associated with replacement dwellings and things that are required to be recorded in our local clerk's office. And then finally, those construction provisions associated with Section R327, those fire hardening standards that you're well familiar with at this point in time, those are now going forward going to apply to all replacement dwellings in resource zones. Here are the affected code sections associated with those. The next changes to state law deal with updated definitions for residential facilities and residential homes. The board might be aware of this, but residential facilities and homes, these are generally uses that are allowed in single-family dwellings statewide. That's mandated via state law. Residential facilities and treatment homes are generally places where residential facilities that are licensed by the state can provide some type of treatment care or residential care for any number of individuals. Residential treatment homes are limited up to 5 or fewer individuals, and treatment facilities are 6 to 15 individuals. This just clarifies throughout our code that those uses are actually afforded in any zones that allow single-family dwellings as an outright use. Again, just calling out that residential homes are allowed where single-family dwellings are allowed, and multifamily residences are the zones where residential treatment facilities are allowed. Here's all the affected code sections there. It's quite a number of them. Next set of changes deal with 4-year approval duration timelines that are mandated by state law for certain uses. The board might be aware that when we issue land use decisions at a local level, typically those are afforded a 2-year approval window, during which time the applicant has to actually initiate whatever that use is or apply for a formal extension through our office. However, there are certain uses which are afforded a 4-year approval window. You can think things like non-farm dwellings are one of those uses. State law recently changed to bring a few other residential uses under that 4-year approval timeline. Those are replacement dwellings in the exclusive farm use zone and hardship dwellings in the exclusive farm use zone. And this is just updating our code to reflect those changes. Agency comments through this process. We've only received one from our senior transportation planner. He reviewed all the proposed amendments and determined that they were in compliance with the statewide planning goal 12 and that there were no potential transportation planning rule effects from the proposed amendments. Public comments. We've only received one public comment to date. That was from Ken Katzeroff of Schwabe Law Firm. Originally, this set of proposed amendments included the addition of terms related to agricultural land in our Title 19 areas. So the board is aware Title 19 incorporates some land surrounding the city of Bend. It's a relatively unique set of zones that we have in the city of Bend that relatively limited. But they also, because they are limited and came up via some unique historical circumstances, they didn't include state definitions for things like agricultural lands and the uses that are afforded within those lands. That's caused some problems over the years associated with applicants pursuing certain uses in those Title 19 areas. And so at the request of our current planning staff, we initially thought we were just going to take all of those agricultural definitions and put them in the title from Title 18 into Title 19. However, Ken raised some concerns that this might rise to the level of a policy decision. And so all those proposed definitions have been struck from the code package, and you'll no longer see them in there. For reference, it's Exhibit Q, and as a part of your attached ordinance is where you would have originally found those, but you'll notice that they no longer are included. Planning Commission held a hearing on these proposed amendments on August 22nd. They voted to close the hearing and the open record period during that same date, and ultimately voted 5-0 to recommend approval of the proposed amendments. And then finally, your next steps here. We have a public hearing scheduled for next Wednesday on the 25th. Obviously, if the board has any questions at this point in time, you can answer them.
Carl, do you remember what two planning commissioners were not at that meeting at the 5-0 vote?
I believe Commissioner Hovkamp was not in attendance. I can't remember the other one off the top.
Okay, all right. I just was curious. It was 5-0, so, all right.
Are there any questions?
No questions.
Thank you very much.
Of course.
I think we're good. We've done this. This is like my 6th or 7th time, I think, so. All right. And you did find it unanimous, what Ken had suggested with Exhibit Q, that really it wasn't a good idea.
So before we actually even started the public hearing process, before the Planning Commission, we elected to just remove that set of amendments just to keep things as streamlined as possible. And given that could be construed as more of a policy decision, we elected at some point in the future, we may try to put that as a part of a larger amendment package, but not something specifically related to a housekeeping package.
Okay, great. So it'll be next Wednesday then.
Correct.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your patience.
Commissioners.
We do appreciate it. Do we have any other items? Any other items?
Couple little things for myself. So legislative group at AOC this weekend, the kind of end of the summer, I guess, not the summertime legislative event. I will not be attending though, so I might dial into some Friday or Saturday, but I'm not going to go to Salem. I won't be here on Wednesday this week, so I won't be at the board meeting on Wednesday. Happy birthday to my wife, Kathy, on Thursday.
Oh my gosh.
Also on Saturday, I was really able to attend this Deschutes Civic Assembly, the citizens assembly that got together that we have our logo on. So I was able to show up Saturday morning at the beginning of it. I was able to come back midday and did an interview with a videographer that's involved with this process. Remember, it's kind of the youth homeless is the topic, but it's bigger than that. It's a practice of what does a civic assembly look like. So couple councilors from Bend were there. The citizens got together Saturday and Sunday, and then this is going to be coming together again in a couple of weeks, October 4th, 5th, and 6th to finish it up. So it's quite a commitment by the citizens that are doing it. Hopefully they come up with some good recommendations and a deep knowledge on the topics.
Okay.
That's it.
And I honestly just want to thank Janice for making those comments today. I think I just saw that one major company said people have to come back to work in the office. I think it was Amazon or something. And Oregon Health Authority could really be incredibly more effective if they would come back to the office. So
Well, and it was pretty stark thinking that, okay, we've got a big organization, people want a life-work balance and they want, the benefits and the opportunity to be able to do this. But if you're not being effective and critically, focused on your job, that may not be a great investment for the people to have such a huge department with everybody at home.
oh, well, they spent 21 million, Deloitte did, auditing the
Yeah,
behavioral
right.
health, and they recommended that they hire one more executive director underneath the head person. Anyway, but I really, I appreciate what Janice said today. So, thank you very much. Are there any executive today? Are we good? Are we really good? And you're not going to be here on Wednesday. So this meeting is adjourned and we will be having our next meeting Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. here.